Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the son of Shanks and reunited with his childhood love Yuta at Elegia. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Fox and the Songstress. The sea was a beast, and it was angry. Waves the size of small mountains rose from the black depths, their peaks frothing with white rage before crashing down with the force of a buster call. Rain fell in thick, horizontal sheets, a torrent of liquid bullets driven by a gale that shrieked like 1,000 tormented souls. In the heart of this maelstrom, a trio of marine battleships floundered. Their iron hulls groaned under the impossible pressure, their cannons useless, their flags shredded to wet ribbons. One listed heavily to port, its rudder broken, doomed to be swallowed by the next colossal wave. The others fought just to stay afloat, their crews scrambling on slick decks, their officers screaming orders that were instantly stolen by the wind. They were playthings for the ocean's fury. A mile ahead of them, a sliver of crimson and black danced where the warships drowned. The Crimson Whirlwind was not a ship built for brute force. It was a vessel of pure, defiant speed, a long-hulled sloop with a single, reinforced mast and a sail the color of dried blood. It sliced through the rising walls of water, not trying to break them, but to ride their momentum. At its helm stood a young man who seemed to belong to the storm as much as the wind and rain. Naruto D. Uzumaki held the wheel with a light, practiced touch, his knuckles white but his stance relaxed. He was a paradox of calm in the center of chaos. Sun-kissed blonde hair, already soaked and dark, was plastered to his forehead, revealing the strange, faint whisker-like marks on his cheeks. His eyes, a blue so vivid they seemed to glow in the storm-darkened twilight, were fixed on the churning horizon. A high-collared black coat, unbuttoned and whipping wildly behind him, did little to ward off the chill, but he didn't seem to notice. A grin was fixed on his face, one of genuine, reckless joy. "Come on, you old bastard," he yelled into the gale, his voice a cheerful roar that should have been swallowed but instead seemed to ride the wind. "Is that all you've got?" The sea answered with a wave that crested directly over the ship, threatening to swamp it entirely. Naruto laughed, spinning the wheel hard to starboard. The Crimson Whirlwind heeled over at a terrifying angle, its mast nearly parallel with the water. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed it would capsize, but then it cut sharply up the face of the liquid mountain, using the wave's own power to launch itself over the peak. It landed in a trough with a shuddering crash that would have splintered a lesser vessel, sending a plume of white water high into the air. "That's more like it." Naruto cheered, his grin widening. He gave the ship's railing an affectionate pat. "Good girl. Just a little more." He wasn't insane, nor was he suicidal. He was simply better. He could feel the ocean's rhythm, the subtle shifts in pressure, the intent behind every surge and swell. It was an extension of the same sense he used to read a man's killing intent, a form of observation hockey so ingrained it was like breathing. He had been trained by a master, a man who believed the world was a weapon, and to survive it, you had to learn its language. But it wasn't just skill driving him through the heart of a storm that had crippled a marine fleet. It was the frantic, desperate pulse emanating from a small, worn piece of paper tucked into a waterproof pouch on his belt. A vivre card. For 12 years, it had been a quiet, dormant thing, a fragile memento of a life he'd been forced to leave behind. It was a piece of her soul, a promise given by a little girl with mismatched pink and white hair under the perpetually twilight sky of a musical island. 2 days ago, it had flared to life. It didn't just smolder, it burned. It pulsed with a desperate, overwhelming power that had screamed at him across half a grand line. It felt like a song and a sob all at once, a beacon of immense power and immense pain. He had dropped everything, abandoned his course for the new world, and set sail, letting the burning scrap of paper guide him. The storm was a deterrent, a natural barrier the world government likely believed would keep unwanted guests away from whatever was happening at its epicenter. For Naruto, it was just a final, exhilarating hurdle. He felt a change in the air before he saw it. The shriek of the wind softened, replaced by a low, resonant hum. The rain, which had been a freezing downpour, turned into a lukewarm mist. He squinted, his vibrant blue eyes cutting through the gloom. Ahead, the storm simply ended. It was not a gradual tapering off, but a stark, unnatural wall of churning black clouds that bordered a region of serene, impossibly calm sea. And at the center of that calm, under a sky painted in hues of lavender and rose, was an island. Elegia. As the crimson whirlwind slid from the chaos of the storm into the placid water, the sound hit him. It wasn't just music. It was a physical presence. A melody of hope and joy and relentless, suffocating happiness vibrated in the very air, thrumming against the ship's hull and through the soles of his boots. He could feel it on his skin, a strange, cloying warmth. The world here was saturated with it, every color brighter, every shape softer. The island itself looked like it was built from a child's dream, with towers of spun sugar, bridges of licorice, and buildings that looked like gingerbread houses. His grin faded, replaced by a sharp, analytical frown. This wasn't right. The happiness felt hollow, manufactured. It was a beautiful lie painted over something deeply, horribly wrong. He moored the crimson whirlwind at a small, secluded cove, leaping from the deck to the shore with the light grace of a cat. He moved inland, his senses on high alert. The music grew louder, drawing everything toward its source, a colossal concert stage erected in the island's main plaza. Throngs of people, pirates, civilians, even a few off-duty Marines who must have been here before the storm, were gathered, their faces tilted upward, their eyes wide with a glazed, ecstatic bliss. They swayed in unison, completely captivated. And there, on the stage, was the source of it all. Yuta. 12 years had changed her. The small, scrappy girl he remembered was gone, replaced by a goddess. Her hair was still that iconic split of crimson and white, but now it flowed around her like a living cape. She wore a striking, winged outfit, and she held the entire world in the palm of her hand with nothing but her voice. Her song poured out of her, a cascade of pure, weaponized emotion that held thousands in its thrall. For a moment, Naruto forgot to breathe. It was her. The same fiery spirit he saw in her eyes, the same passion that had driven her even as a child. But it was twisted. The promise they had made, for her to create a new era of peace with her music, had been warped into this gilded cage of forced euphoria. He saw other pirate crews in the crowd. A massive, blue-skinned fishman. A man with a long nose and goggles. A woman with dark hair reading a book, seemingly unbothered. A swordsman with a shock of green hair and 3 katanas at his hip. And near them, a boy in a simple red vest and a worn straw hat, his grin almost as wide and reckless as Naruto's own. He felt a strange resonance from the boy, a thrum of will that was familiar, like an echo of his father's. A fellow D, perhaps. Interesting. Naruto didn't charge the stage. He didn't scream her name. That would be foolish. He was an unknown quantity here, and she was surrounded by what amounted to a hypnotized army. To rush in would be to make himself a target and likely turn her against him before he could even speak. He needed to understand the situation, to see the full picture. His master had beaten that lesson into him one painful spar at a time. Power without intellect is just a tantrum. He began to move through the crowd, a shadow of calm focus in a sea of blissful ignorance. He melted through the throng, his presence so assured that people shifted out of his way without conscious thought. It wasn't a trick of speed or a burst of hockey, it was the quiet, undeniable charisma of a man completely certain of himself and his purpose. He was about 30 feet from the stage when trouble started. A group of hulking, boorish pirates, their wits less dulled by the music than the others, began shoving their way forward. They were drunk on more than just the song. One of them, a brute with a scarred face and a rusty cutlass, knocked over a small child, then laughed as the girl's mother tried to help her up. "Get out of the way, lady. We're here for the real show, the pirates snarled, shoving the woman aside. Naruto stopped. His eyes, which had been focused on Yuta, narrowed to cold slits. The ambient warmth of the music seemed to drop a few degrees around him. He didn't move, didn't draw a weapon. He simply focused. He gathered his will, the indomitable spirit inherited from his father, and focused it. Not as a weapon of mass destruction, but as a surgeon's scalpel. He aimed it with pinpoint precision at the dozen or so pirates causing the disturbance. There was no sound, no explosion of energy. For a split second, an invisible, crushing pressure descended upon the troublemakers and them alone. Their eyes bulged, their sneers frozen on their faces as a terror beyond reason flooded their minds. Then, in perfect unison, they collapsed, their limbs twitching before they fell still, foam flecking their lips. The effect was immediate and profound, but only for those who could perceive it. In the crowd, the straw-hatted boy's grin vanished. His head whipped around, his dark eyes wide with shock. "Whoa! What was that?" he breathed, his hand instinctively going to his hat. It felt like Shanks. Zoro, the swordsman beside him, had his hand on the hilt of his white katana, Wado Ikemanji. He hadn't felt the full force of the will, but he'd felt its ripple, a chilling pressure that made the air go thick and cold. "Someone with serious spirit is here," he murmured, his one good eye scanning the crowd. On the stage, Yuta faltered. Mid-verse, her voice wavered, a single note going flat. Her power was absolute in this world, an extension of her own soul. For another will, another spirit, to impose itself so forcefully was like a phantom hand squeezing her heart. The sensation was terrifying, but underneath it, buried beneath 12 years of pain and loneliness, it was familiar. So achingly, impossibly familiar. Her eyes, wide and searching, swept across the ocean of faces below her, looking for a ghost. Naruto paid their reactions no mind. The path ahead of him was now clear. He continued his unhurried walk, his expression unreadable. He reached the very front of the crowd, just before the barricade separating the audience from the stage, and stopped. He was close enough now to see the conflict in her eyes, the frantic energy behind her perfect smile. She was projecting happiness, but she was drowning in despair. It was then that the world outside decided to intrude. The sound of naval horns blared from the coast, a harsh, metallic sound that was a violent intrusion into the symphony of the Yuta world. A moment later, a squadron of Marines in their white justice coats marched into the plaza, led by a tall, stern-faced man with a distinctive pompadour and twin sabers at his waist, Vice Admiral Momonga. "Yuta. By order of the world government, you are under arrest." Momonga's voice boomed, amplified by a den mushi. "You are a threat to global security. Release these people at once and surrender peacefully." The crowd, broken from their reverie by the intrusion, began to murmur and panic. The pirates among them drew their weapons, seeing the Marines as a threat to their private concert. Yuta's fragile composure finally shattered. The mask of the joyful idol fell away, revealing the furious, cornered girl underneath. "Surrender. Release them," she shrieked, her voice laced with a hysterical edge. Her angelic wings seemed to darken. "Why would I do that? Out there is a world of pain, of suffering, of pirates burning down villages. A world where fathers abandon their daughters." The last words were filled with a raw, personal agony that cut through the air. "Here, everyone is happy. Everyone is safe. I will not let you take this away from them. From me. This is my world. My new Genesis. And you will all stay here with me, forever." Her declaration hung in the air, a thesis of benevolent tyranny. The music swelled, no longer just joyful but now laced with a possessive, binding power. The very ground seemed to groan as musical notes solidified, forming chains that began to snake towards the panicking crowd and the Marines. This was the breaking point. This was the perversion of their promise. Naruto's voice, calm and clear, cut through the rising chaos. It wasn't loud, but it carried with an undeniable authority that made everyone, Yuta, Momonga, the Straw Hats, the entire plaza, fall silent. That's not freedom, Yuta. Every head turned toward him. He stood perfectly still, his blue eyes locked on hers, a bridge of impossible intensity spanning the distance between them. And it's not the promise we made. On the stage, Yuta froze. Her breath hitched. The music died in her throat. That voice. That calm, unwavering tone. Those words. A memory, buried under a mountain of trauma, erupted in her mind, a small boy with whisker marks on his cheeks, holding out his pinky finger to her under a sky just like this one. I promise, Yuta. I'll become the freest man on the seas, so you can sing your songs for the whole world and bring a new era of peace, for real this time. Naruto. The name was a whisper, a fragile, disbelieving breath. Momonga, seeing a new variable he couldn't account for, pointed his saber at the blonde man. You. Civilian. Step away from the stage. This is a world government matter. Naruto didn't even glance at him. His entire world was focused on the girl with the shattered expression on the stage. He took one step forward, hopping over the barricade with casual ease, landing softly on the ground in the no-man's land between the stage and the military. Identify yourself, a Marine captain shouted, leveling his rifle. Naruto finally turned his head, just enough to give the assembled Marines a sideways glance. His easygoing grin returned, but this time it was all sharp edges. It was the grin of a fox showing its teeth. You want her? He asked, his voice still deceptively light. He gestured over his shoulder at Yuta with his thumb. You'll have to get through me. He faced them fully now, planting his feet and rolling his shoulders as if preparing for a light stretch. His blue eyes sparkled with a dangerous light. And trust me, he said, his voice dropping into a low, confident growl that promised a world of hurt. You don't want to. The standoff was absolute. The son of a Yonko, a hidden power unleashed, stood as the sole guardian of a goddess of song who threatened to trap the world in a dream. The promise of battle hung thick and heavy in the air, a discordant note in Yuta's broken symphony. Hidden amongst the chaos, perched atop a gingerbread clock tower, a figure watched the scene unfold with unnatural stillness. They were cloaked in a simple, featureless white robe, their face obscured by a smooth, porcelain mask devoid of any expression. They were a ghost in the crowd, utterly unremarkable and therefore completely invisible. This was the Silencer, an agent of the Celestial Arbiters, the shadow hand of Imu. A small, black den mushi, specially bred for silent, encrypted communication, rested in their gloved palm. They pressed a single, silent button, opening a channel to the highest authority in the world. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their thoughts were transmitted directly. Subject Alpha, Uzumaki, has made contact with Subject Diva, Yuta, at the designated coordinates on Elegia. The Silencer's gaze lingered on Naruto. They had felt the burst of haki. Controlled. Precise. Far beyond the projections for a subject of his age. It was the will of a king, tempered and honed. Conqueror's haki confirmed. Level of mastery is anomalous. He is not merely powerful, he is disciplined. Then, their attention shifted to the standoff. To the lone young man placing himself between the might of the world government and the source of a global-scale incident. It was an act of supreme, almost arrogant, confidence. Mythical Zoan, Hito no Mi, model, Kyubi no Kitsune, confirmed by paternal lineage. Subject is exhibiting behavior consistent with a protector designation for Subject Diva. The synergy between them is a potential catalyst. The Silencer processed the scene, every nuance, every flicker of emotion on the key players' faces. Momonga's fury. The Straw Hat Boy's intense curiosity. Yuta's utter, soul-shaking confusion. And Naruto's unwavering, absolute resolve. Conclusion: the five elders' concerns are validated. The convergence of these two specific anomalies presents a threat exceeding initial parameters. Standard marine protocols will be insufficient. Recommending escalation, the black den mushies. I blinked once, signifying the message was received. The silencer remained in place, a silent, patient statue, ready to observe the coming storm. The opening act was over. Now, the real performance would begin. Chapter 2, Conqueror's Duet. The silence that followed Naruto's challenge was a fragile thing, a soap bubble waiting for a pinprick. Vice Admiral Momonga provided it. His face, a mask of grim duty, hardened. He had his orders, direct from Fleet Admiral Sakazuki himself. The girl, Yuta, was a Class S threat. Her ability to mentally enslave thousands, including pirates with bounties in the hundreds of millions, put her on a level that defied conventional power scaling. The command was simple: capture or eliminate. There was no room for negotiation, and certainly no time for a standoff with some unknown, blonde upstart with a death wish. Arrogant fool, Momonga growled, his voice a low rumble of thunder. He raised his saber high, its polished steel catching the dreamlike light of Elegia's sky. You have chosen to align yourself with a menace to the world. You will share her fate. All units, subdue the girl. Kill him. The command shattered the tension. A wave of white and blue surged forward, a disciplined tide of marine justice. Rifles cracked, their reports like firecrackers in the surreal atmosphere. Cannonballs, fired from portable units at the back, shrieked through the air, arcing towards the lone figure standing before the stage. Naruto's sharp grin didn't falter. In the instant before the first bullet reached him, he vanished. He didn't move in a blur. He was simply there one moment and gone the next, reappearing in the heart of the charging marine formation as if he'd teleported. The soldiers who had been charging his previous position stumbled, their momentum carrying them past empty air. Before they could reorient, the chaos began. Naruto moved with a fluid, predatory grace that was utterly at odds with the rigid formations of the Marines. He employed Soru, the Rokushiki's high-speed movement technique, but his version was different. It was less a series of explosive footfalls and more a silent, continuous flow, like a fox darting through undergrowth. He wove through the ranks of soldiers, a golden-haired phantom delivering precise, debilitating strikes. A Marine captain swung his cutlass in a wide, decapitating arc. Naruto swayed backward, the blade hissing past his nose, and tapped the man's sternum with a single, extended finger. It was Shurgan, the finger pistol, but instead of piercing flesh, a controlled pulse of golden armament hockey flared at the point of impact. The captain's eyes went wide, not with pain, but with pure shock as every muscle in his body seized. He crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut, unconscious before he hit the ground. Another group swarmed him, jabbing with rifles and bayonets. Naruto spun low, a whirlwind of black and gold. His leg scythed out in a rankyaku, but instead of a blade of air, it was a blunt crescent of pure kinetic force that swept the soldiers off their feet, sending them tumbling into their comrades. He never struck to kill. A chop to the neck here, a hockey-reinforced palm heel strike to a shoulder joint there. It was a dance of overwhelming power, yet tempered with an absolute, unwavering control. The cannonballs arrived, screaming down from above. Naruto looked up, his blue eyes tracking their trajectory. He didn't dodge. Instead, he met the first one head-on. He braced himself, his entire body tensing as he focused his haki. Tekai, he grunted, the word a soft exhalation. His skin took on a faint, metallic sheen, overlaid with the same golden aura that pulsed from his fingertips. The cannonball, a sphere of solid iron meant to splinter the hulls of ships, slammed into his chest and stopped. It didn't explode. It didn't bounce. It simply deformed against his torso with a deafening clang, a dent appearing in the iron as if it had struck a mountain. The projectile fell to the ground with a pathetic thud, misshapen and useless. Naruto caught the second cannonball in one hand, his fingers sinking slightly into the metal. With a casual, fluid spin, he hurled it back, not at the cannons, but at a section of the stage where a piece of scaffolding had been damaged in the initial chaos. The cannonball smashed into it, creating a cloud of dust and debris that served as a makeshift smokescreen. The Straw Hat Pirates watched, their jaws collectively on the floor. "Did you see that?" Usopp shrieked, his eyes threatening to pop out of their sockets. He just caught a cannonball. He caught it and then he threw it. Is he even human? His control of hockey is incredible, Sanji noted, a curl of smoke drifting up from his cigarette. He took a long drag, his usual suave demeanor replaced with a look of intense analysis. He's coating himself in armament, but it's different. It's like it has a life of its own. Luffy, however, wasn't analyzing. He was vibrating with excitement, his eyes sparkling. He's amazing. He's fighting all of them by himself and he's smiling. He's just like, the comparison died on his lips, but the sentiment was clear. The strength, the freedom, the sheer joy in the face of overwhelming odds, it was the spirit of a true king. "I like him," he declared, as if that settled the matter for the entire universe. Zoro's single eye was narrowed, his hand resting on the hilt of Sandai Kitetsu. He wasn't watching the spectacle, he was reading the fight. He's not just strong. He's smart, the swordsman murmured, his voice low and appreciative. Every move is efficient. No wasted energy. He's disabling them, turning their own numbers against them. He's not fighting like a brawler. He's fighting like a grandmaster playing a chess game. On the stage, Yuta was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The sight of Naruto, her Naruto, the boy from her memories, now a man of impossible power, fighting for her, defending her, sent a tremor of warmth through her soul. But it was immediately drowned by a wave of panic and rage. Fighting? Violence? This was exactly what she was trying to prevent. This was the ugliness of the real world intruding on her perfect sanctuary. "Stop it," she screamed, her voice amplified by her power. The music, which had been silenced, roared back to life, but it was no longer joyful. It was a discordant, chaotic frenzy. "There's no fighting in my world." From the sheet music swirling around her, phantom figures began to emerge. Grotesque, candy-colored beasts with licorice claws and lollipop eyes. Knights made of musical staves, their swords sharp-ended quarter notes. They didn't distinguish between friend and foe. They simply attacked the source of the conflict, the Marines, and Naruto himself. A giant gingerbread monster lunged at Naruto, its gummy jaws snapping. He sidestepped it with effortless ease. "Yuta, stop. They're just puppets. They can't fix this," he called out, his voice cutting through the din. "They will. They'll make it all stop," she cried back, her control fraying. A barrage of musical notes shot from the stage, hard as steel, forcing Naruto to weave and dodge. He was now fighting a war on two fronts, the disciplined assault of the Marines and the chaotic, emotional outburst of Yuta's power. He deflected a Marine's saber with his forearm, the golden hockey flaring, and simultaneously ducked under a swooping spear thrown by a Note Knight. This wasn't working. He couldn't fight her and them at the same time. He had to get through to her. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a fraction of a second. He stopped trying to see the battle and started to feel it. He extended his observation hockey, not just to sense killing intent, but to feel the emotional torrent pouring out of Yuta, the very thing that was giving her creation's life. It was a hurricane of fear, betrayal, loneliness, and a desperate, misguided love. He found the rhythm in her chaos. Instead of fighting her musical beasts, he began to move with them. When a candy monster lunged at a squad of Marines, Naruto used Sora to appear behind it, delivering a palm strike that sent it careening into another group, scattering them like bowling pins. When a volley of her sharp musical notes flew at him, he used a sweeping kick to redirect them, sending the volley slicing through the rifles of an advancing Marine line, disarming them in a single, fluid motion. He became the conductor of her symphony of destruction. He was no longer fighting her power, he was guiding it, turning her panicked lashing out into a precise, coordinated, and non-lethal defense. A powerful resonance, a hum that existed outside of sound, passed between them. It was the alignment of their wills, their hockey. On the stage, Yuta gasped, her hands flying to her temples. She could feel him. Not just see him, but feel his intent, his calm, his unwavering certainty, a steady rock in the storm of her own emotions. Fight with me, Yuta. The thought was not his voice, but his spirit, an idea projected directly into her mind through their shared connection. Not against them. With me. Show them our strength, not your fear. Our strength. The words echoed in the deepest parts of her soul. For a moment, the frantic, discordant music smoothed out, finding a clearer, more powerful melody. The chaos began to have purpose. It was in that moment of newfound sync that the sky bled yellow. A single point of light appeared high above the plaza, brighter than the false sun of the Yuta world. It descended with sickening speed, resolving into the shape of a man, tall, thin, dressed in a gaudy yellow-striped suit. He landed on a rooftop with the gentle nonchalance of a falling leaf, adjusting his sunglasses. Admiral Kizaru had arrived. Oh, the Admiral drawled, his voice a lazy, stretched-out sound that was more terrifying than any shout. What a very bright and noisy party. The 5 elders seemed so concerned. I can't imagine why. Vice Admiral Momonga snapped a salute. Admiral Kizaru, sir. We were attempting to subdue the target, but we've met with unexpected resistance. Kizaru waved a dismissive hand, not even looking at him. His gaze, hidden behind his shades, was fixed on Naruto and Yuta. Resistance, yes, that's one word for it. A mythical Zoan wielder, and the little songstress herself. What a troublesome combination. It almost makes me want to try. He raised a single finger. A pinpoint of intense, golden-yellow light formed at its tip. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? He asked conversationally to the air. Before anyone could react, he was gone from the rooftop and standing directly in front of Naruto, his leg a blur of yellow light aimed at Naruto's head. Naruto's eyes widened, his observation haki screaming danger. He brought his arms up in a cross guard, reinforcing them with every ounce of armament haki he could muster. The impact was cataclysmic. A boom like a thunderclap echoed across Elegia. Naruto was launched backward like a cannonball himself, his feet gouging 2 deep trenches in the stone plaza as he skidded 100 feet. He crashed into the base of the stage with enough force to make the entire structure groan. The golden aura around his arms flickered violently, and he gritted his teeth, a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. The bones in his forearms screamed in protest, fractured in a dozen places despite his defense. Kizaru stood where Naruto had been, his leg still smoking slightly. Ooh. You blocked it, he said, a hint of genuine surprise in his lazy tone. Most people just pop. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, his arms hanging limply. A faint orange glow enveloped his forearms, and the sound of cracking bone began to reverse itself as his devil fruit's natural healing factor kicked in, knitting the fractures back together with astonishing speed. You're fast, old man, Naruto breathed, his grin now a grimace of pain and effort. But your kicks are a little light. Kizaru chuckled, a dry, unsettling sound. Such a brave face. But this is not an arrest, you understand. My orders from the very top are, pest control. He turned his lazy gaze toward Yuta, who was frozen in terror on the stage. The sheer, casual power of the Admiral had shocked her more than the entire Marine Army. The source of the infestation must be cleansed. He raised both his hands, fingers spread wide. Yasukani no Magatama, he said, his voice dropping the lazy affectation for a moment, replaced by the cold, impersonal finality of an executioner. Hundreds, then thousands, of pinpoints of light bloomed around him, a celestial shower of pure destruction. They were aimed not just at Yuta, but at the entire stage, at the very heart of her power. It was an attack designed for total annihilation, an overwhelming wave of light-speed projectiles that no single being could possibly block or dodge. Naruto saw the attack forming. He saw the terror on Yuta's face, her body paralyzed by fear. He saw the light shower converge on her. In that moment, there was no strategy. There was no thought. There was only a single, primal, absolute imperative that roared up from the core of his being. Protect her. The promise he made as a boy. The reason he'd endured a decade of hellish training. The purpose that had driven him across the sea. It all converged into a single point of explosive will. Yuta. A sun erupted in the middle of the plaza. It was not the yellow light of Kizaru. It was a torrent of brilliant, golden-orange energy that burst from Naruto's body, a raw, untamed power that felt as ancient and vital as life itself. His body became a silhouette within the fiery shroud. The energy coalesced, forming a bubbling, humanoid shape around him, with two long, fox-like ears and a snarling jaw. And behind him, 9 long, whip-like tails of pure, coruscating energy unfurled, lashing out with a roar of their own. He hadn't fully transformed into a giant beast. He had manifested the raw power of the Kyubi no Kitsune as a cloak of pure, tangible life force. The light shower descended. Naruto, now wreathed in this incandescent aura, met the storm of light head-on. The golden energy of his cloak solidified, forming massive, multi-jointed arms, chakra arms, extensions of his own will. With a guttural roar that was more beast than man, he began to fight the light. The scene was sublime, terrifying. Hundreds of beams of pure, destructive light rained down, and a demon fox of golden energy stood against the tide, its ethereal limbs batting them away. Each impact created a blinding explosion, a concussive boom that shook the island to its foundations. He wasn't nullifying the beams, he was physically striking them, a feat that should have been impossible. The sheer density and power of his Haki-infused life force was treating Kizaru's Logia element as a solid, physical object. On the stage, Yuta stared, her mind wiped clean of everything but the image before her. Naruto. Her Naruto. A radiant, golden demon, standing between her and certain death, weathering a storm of light to protect her. The lies she had built, the fragile walls of her dream world, shattered into a million pieces. The danger was real. The pain of the world was real. And his sacrifice, his protection, that was real, too. More real than anything she had ever known. He was willing to die for her. Here, in the real world. Tears streamed down her face, washing away the last traces of her delusion. Her fear was burned away by the heat of his golden fire, replaced by a furious, protective love of her own. He was fighting for her. Now, she would sing for him. Her stance changed. Her expression, once terrified and confused, became one of fierce, unwavering resolve. She took a deep breath, and when she sang again, the voice that emerged was different. The music was no longer a tool of control or a lament of despair. It was a war drum. A battle hymn. A soaring, powerful anthem of pure, defiant power. The song, taught musica, but a version reborn, a requiem turned into a rebellion, washed over the battlefield. This time, it did not create monsters. It created miracles. The Straw Hats felt it first. A wave of invigorating energy washed over them. Luffy, who had been about to leap into the fray, felt a surge of strength, his muscles coiling with newfound power. Zoro felt his senses sharpen, the world slowing down around him. Sanji felt a fire ignite in his legs, a restless energy begging to be unleashed. Naruto felt it most of all. The song poured into him, not just sound, but pure energy, syncing with his own golden aura. The fractures in his bones, not yet fully healed, vanished instantly. The drain on his stamina from manifesting the Kyubi's cloak lessened. Her song was a river of strength, and he was drinking from it. His movements became faster, sharper. He was no longer just defending. He was attacking. One of his chakra arms lashed out, faster than light, and smashed into the ground where Kizaru was hovering, forcing the admiral to dissolve and reform a dozen feet away. Kizaru's lazy smile was gone, replaced by a thin, tight line. This had escalated beyond a simple extermination. The synergy was real. The boy's power was a physical counter to his own, and the girl's song was actively amplifying it. Naruto, his body cloaked in the fiery gold of the nine tails, stood tall amidst the smoking craters, his 9 energy tails whipping through the air. He locked eyes with the admiral, his own blue irises now glowing with feral intensity. Yuta's voice soared, a goddess of song conducting a symphony of war. The conqueror's duet had begun. In the center of the stage, 2 impossible forces prepared to clash, a man made of pure will, and a man made of pure light. From his vantage point, the silencer observed the golden eruption, their eternally placid demeanor for once showing a flicker of something akin to surprise. They zoomed in their vision, analyzing the energy pouring from Naruto. Anomaly detected. Subject Alpha's mythical Zoan manifestation is not a standard physical transformation, the thought was transmitted, cold and analytical. It generates a secondary energy field, tangible and immensely powerful. It behaves as an extension of his will, capable of physically interacting with a Logia-type element. This is not a Zoan trait. It is something other. It is volatile. The silencer watched Naruto's chakra arms bat away Kizaru's light beams. The data was irrefutable. The projections were wrong. The threat was exponentially greater than anticipated. Synergy with subject Diva confirmed. Her Yuta no Mi ability is directly amplifying the anomalous energy output. They are a self-sustaining feedback loop of power. Their gaze fell on Kizaru, who was now being forced onto the defensive for the first time. Conclusion: Admiral Kizaru is an insufficient measure. The threat requires a response that targets the nature of the ability itself, not just the user, the silencer reported. Awaiting further orders, the Black Den Mushi remained silent, but the message had been sent. A new, far deadlier phase of the confrontation was about to be set in motion. Chapter 3, The Demon King's Requiem. The clash between light and will painted Elegia in strokes of blinding violence. Kizaru, for the first time in recent memory, was on the back foot. It was not a retreat, but a forced, tactical repositioning. Naruto, cloaked in the fiery gold of the Kyubi, was a relentless force of nature. His chakra arms, extensions of his haki-fueled life force, were a perfect counter to the Admiral's Logia form. They didn't need to be infused with Busashoku haki in the conventional sense, their very substance, a blend of spiritual and physical energy, could interact with the Admiral's light body as if it were solid. A golden fist the size of a small car slammed down, and Kizaru dissolved into a shower of light particles, reforming 100 yards away. "Ooh, that's quite the aggressive posture," the Admiral commented, his voice retaining its lazy drawl, but his eyes, visible for a moment as he adjusted his glasses, held a sharp, dangerous glint. "You are more troublesome than your father." Naruto didn't reply with words. He replied with action. He shot forward, his feet barely touching the ground, the 9 energy tails behind him propelling him at a velocity that rivaled Kizaru's own light-speed movement. The Admiral transformed into a beam of yellow light to evade, but Naruto, his observation haki amplified by Yuta's song, anticipated the trajectory. He was already there when Kizaru reformed, a spiraling sphere of golden, crackling energy held in his palm. It was a Rasengan, but not the one his namesake was known for. This was his own creation, a perfect fusion of his life force and the crushing power of his armament haki. "Rasengan," he roared, thrusting the sphere forward. Kizaru's eyes widened. He brought his arms up, crossing them to form his Ama no Murakumo sword from pure light. The golden sphere of destruction met the blade of light. The resulting explosion was not a burst of fire or energy, but a deafening implosion of sound and force. A shockwave erupted outwards, tearing up the plaza stones in a perfect circle and sending marines and pirates alike tumbling. The Yuta world flickered, the dreamlike colors wavering as the raw power of the clash threatened to tear the fabric of her creation. The stalemate was absolute. Naruto's raw, ever-regenerating power fueled by Yuta's song, versus Kizaru's untouchable speed and vast destructive potential. It was a battle that could level the island if allowed to continue. But the true enemy was not the Admiral. It was never the Admiral. It was the despair that had been festering in the heart of the island for 12 long years. As Yuta poured her soul into her battle hymn, her strength pushing Naruto to new heights, she was also dredging up the dregs of her own psyche. The trauma of Gordon's apparent betrayal, the horror of the red-hair pirates seemingly massacring the kingdom, the crushing loneliness of her self-imposed exile, it was a poison she had kept locked away. Now, in her moment of greatest emotional outpouring, the lock broke. A new sound began to weave itself into her melody. It was a low, guttural note, a discordant hum that vibrated with pure malice. The sky above Elegia, already a canvas of surreal colors, began to darken, swirling into a vortex of bruised purple and sickly green. The ground trembled, not from the battle, but from something stirring beneath. Yuta. What's happening? Naruto grunted, pushing against Kizaru's light sword, his golden aura flickering as the new, malevolent energy interfered with her song. I don't know, she stammered, her voice wavering. The empowering anthem she was singing was being twisted, corrupted from within. The sheet music that had swirled around her, a symbol of her power, began to bleed black ink, the notes contorting into screaming faces. Something is wrong. The cheerful gingerbread buildings began to melt, their colors running like wax as they transformed into grotesque, leering structures. The very air grew thick and heavy, filled with a palpable sense of dread that dwarfed the tension of the battle. From the ink-blackened sheet music, a new figure began to form. It was not a candy monster or a note knight. It was a colossal, horrifying entity, a demon king woven from pure despair and musical notation. It had a monstrous, skeletal body, 2 heads, one screaming, one weeping, and a shadowy form that seemed to absorb the light around it. Tot Musica, the demon king of songs, had been reborn. And this time, it was not an accidental byproduct of her power. It was the avatar of her deepest, most repressed agony, and it had a will of its own. Its roar was a symphony of every negative emotion Yuta had ever felt, a sound that bypassed the ears and clawed directly at the soul. Everyone in the plaza, marine and pirate alike, clutched their heads, their own fears and regrets bubbling to the surface. Kizaru broke off his clash with Naruto, zipping back to a safe distance, his face for once completely devoid of laziness. "What is that thing?" he uttered, his voice tight. This was not in any report. This was not a devil fruit power. This was something primordial. Something wrong. Tot Musica ignored the Admiral. It ignored the screaming crowds. Its multiple, soulless eyes fixed on the 2 people at the center of the stage, Yuta, its creator, and Naruto, the symbol of the hope that was trying to banish it. With a shriek that cracked the very sky, it lashed out, a colossal arm made of solidified, screeching notes swiping at the stage. Naruto moved instantly. He grabbed Yuta around the waist, leaping from the stage just as the demonic arm smashed it to splinters. He landed 50 yards away, setting her down gently. "Are you all right?" She was shaking, her face pale as death. It's my fault," she whispered, her eyes locked on the monster. "It's all my pain, my hatred, it's alive." The Demon King was not just a physical threat. It began to actively consume the world. Where its shadow fell, the vibrant colors of the Yuta world turned to a monochrome gray. It was literally eating the dream, and worse, the boundary between the dream and reality was starting to fray. A real, physical building on the coast of Elegia crumbled into dust, its essence absorbed by the creature. "This is bad," Luffy said, his usual grin gone, replaced by a grim seriousness. "That thing's not just in her dream world. It's starting to eat the real island." Luffy didn't hesitate. "Gear. Fourth. Snakeman," he roared, his body inflating and coating itself in hockey. He launched himself at the monster, his python fist stretching and accelerating. The punch connected with Tot Musica's chest. And did absolutely nothing. It was like punching a hole in smoke. Luffy's fist passed through the creature's body, the malevolent energy momentarily clinging to his arm, making him recoil with a hiss of pain and disgust. It's no good. I can't hit it. Kizaru, seeing the existential threat, made a rare tactical decision. He pointed a finger at the Demon King. Yada no Kagami. A beam of light shot out, creating a path for him to travel, but as his light form entered the creature's body, it was simply absorbed. He was forcefully ejected a moment later, reforming with a grimace. My light, it devours it. The Demon King was immune to conventional attacks. It was not a creature of flesh and blood, but a concept given form. A being of pure, negative emotion. You couldn't punch despair. You couldn't cut sorrow. Naruto stood before the beast, his Kyuubi cloak flaring. He could feel the sheer, overwhelming pressure of the creature's existence. It was an anti-life force, a vortex of spiritual decay. His own power, derived from the very essence of life, was being naturally suppressed just by being near it. He understood. This wasn't a fight you could win with your fists. This was a battle for the soul. He turned to Yuta, who was on her knees, staring in horror at the monster she had unleashed. He knelt in front of her, placing his hands on her shoulders. His voice was firm, but gentle. Yuta. Listen to me. Look at me. She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. It's going to destroy everything. It's all my fault. No, he said, his gaze unwavering. It's not your fault. It's your pain. And you don't have to bear it alone anymore. He pointed at the monster. It was born from your heart. The only way to beat it is from the inside. We have to fight it in its home territory. She didn't understand. What do you mean? I mean your soul, he said simply. Your world. The real Yuta world, the one in your heart, not this fake one you've projected. I need you to trust me. Completely. Can you do that? She looked at his eyes, so full of certainty, of a belief in her that she had never had in herself. She thought of him standing against an admiral for her, of his promise that echoed through 12 years of loneliness. She gave a shaky, determined nod. Yes. Good. Naruto stood up, turning to face the chaos. The Straw Hats were trying to evacuate civilians. The Marines, under Momonga's command, were firing uselessly at the monster. Kizaru was engaged in a high-speed battle of attrition, trying to draw its attention by firing lasers at its extremities, which it simply regenerated. An unspoken, desperate truce had formed. Everyone versus the end of the world. Luffy! Naruto yelled. The Straw Hat captain, mid-air, glanced over at him. You and your crew. Buy me some time. Keep that thing busy. Luffy grinned, a flash of his old self. You got it, spiky hair. Naruto then looked towards Kizaru. You too, Admiral. Unless you want this thing to eat the whole damn ocean. Kizaru clicked his tongue in annoyance but didn't argue. The logic was sound. He unleashed another Yasukani no Magatama, this time aimed at the monster's face to draw its ire. With his allies providing a distraction, Naruto returned to Yuta's side. He sat down cross-legged in the middle of the ruined plaza, a small island of calm in a sea of pandemonium. I'm going in, he said. Protect my body. He closed his eyes. The golden Kyuubi cloak didn't vanish. Instead, it billowed out, forming a massive, translucent dome of energy around him and Yuta, a shimmering golden sanctuary that deflected stray debris and the waves of despair rolling off the Demon King. Within this dome, Naruto's physical form went still. He drew on his training, on the meditative techniques his master had taught him for controlling the Kyuubi's immense power. He wasn't just channeling his haki. He was projecting his entire consciousness, his very spirit, out of his body. He was diving headfirst into the storm of Yuta's soul. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of sound and color. He felt himself being pulled through a vortex of raw emotion, screams, laughter, sobs, whispers. Then, he landed. He was standing on the burning shore of Elegia. The sky was red, choked with smoke. The beautiful buildings were smoldering ruins. And in the center of the devastation stood a small, terrified girl with pink and white hair, clutching a tattered songbook to her chest. This was it. The source. The moment of trauma that had given birth to top musica. Phantom images flickered around them, a distraught Gordon, a stoic Shanks with his back turned, the silhouettes of the red-hair pirates walking away. These were memories, playing on a loop, forever reinforcing her pain. Naruto didn't fight the phantoms. He didn't try to extinguish the flames. He simply walked through them, his own spiritual form a beacon of calm, golden light in the fiery nightmare. He walked until he stood directly in front of the small, weeping Yuta. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Who are you? He smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. He knelt down so he was at her eye level. You know who I am, Yuta, he said softly. I'm the one who made you a promise. He reached out and, instead of trying to fight her despair, he embraced it. He pulled the small, trembling child form of her consciousness into a hug. He held her as she sobbed, as the nightmare raged around them. Your voice isn't a curse, Yuta, he whispered into her hair, his voice echoing with the conviction of his own soul. It's a gift. The most powerful one in the world. I've seen it. I've felt it. It gives me strength. It gives everyone strength. He pulled back slightly, looking her in the eyes. But you have to control it. You have to want to live. Not in this nightmare, not in a fake dream. In the real world. With me. In the real world, Yuta, sheltered within Naruto's golden dome, felt his words resonate within her. His consciousness, his unwavering belief in her, was a light in her darkness. The self-hatred that had fueled the Demon King began to waver, replaced by a flicker of hope. She finally understood. She didn't have to destroy her pain. She had to accept it, and then overcome it. She stood up, her eyes still closed, but her face was now a mask of fierce determination. She began to sing. Her voice, no longer amplified by a stage, was soft at first. But it was pure. It was a requiem. A song of sorrow, of acceptance, and of farewell. It was the true, tot musica, not a weapon of destruction, but a lament of immense power and beauty. In her soulscape, the burning world around them began to cool. The phantom figures flickered and faded. Naruto stood up, holding the small Yuta's hand. Now, he said, his own spiritual form beginning to blaze with power. Let's finish this. Together. He looked at the raging Demon King in the real world, which was now recoiling from Yuta's new song. He unleashed his full power within the dream. In the real world, the golden dome protecting their bodies exploded outwards. Naruto's physical form remained seated, but from his back, a colossal form made of pure, golden-orange energy erupted. It was the full manifestation of the Kyubi no Kitsune, a mountain-sized fox of translucent energy with 9 titanic tails whipping behind it. It was a being of pure life and will, a god to challenge a demon. The two powers, inextricably linked, prepared to strike. In the soulscape, Naruto, his hand in small Yuta's, held up a spiritual Rasengan. In the real world, the giant Kyubi avatar mimicked the motion, forming a Rasengan the size of a battleship, its roar shaking the heavens. Yuta's requiem reached its crescendo. It was a note of pure, heart-shattering finality. Now. Naruto roared, in both the real world and the dream. He thrust his hand forward. The colossal avatar did the same. The spiritual blow struck the core of the nightmare in Yuta's soul, while the physical manifestation of that same power struck the Demon King in the real world. The impact was silent. A flash of brilliant, world-widening light. Tot Musica, the Demon King, a being born of despair, was struck simultaneously on the physical and spiritual planes. It couldn't fight a battle on two fronts. It couldn't exist in a heart that had finally chosen hope over pain. The creature didn't explode. It shattered. It dissolved into a trillion motes of light, like musical notes ascending to the heavens, its final, death-rattle shriek turning into a peaceful, fading chord. As the light faded, the Yuta world collapsed entirely. The surreal colors bled from the sky, revealing the normal, twilight blue of the real world. The gingerbread houses reverted to stone and wood. The air, once thick with forced joy and then cloying dread, was now just air, crisp and salty. Naruto's Kyuubi avatar faded, and the golden dome collapsed. He slumped forward, the spiritual projection having taken a massive toll. Yuta, her song finished, collapsed beside him, utterly spent. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of waves, the murmur of the stunned crowd, and a new sound, the cutting of a ship's prow through water. A large, imposing vessel with a red, dragon-like figurehead sliced through the waves, its single mast flying a flag that made every pirate in the vicinity freeze in terror, a skull with two crossed sabers behind it and three distinctive red scars over the left eye socket. The Red Dragon. The ship dropped anchor a short distance from the shore. On its bow stood a figure with a simple black cloak, straw sandals, and a shock of vibrant red hair. His gaze swept over the devastated island, the fleet of marine ships, the recovering straw hats, and the unconscious Admiral Kizaru, who had been caught in the final blast of purifying light. Then, his eyes, sharp and intelligent, landed on the two figures lying near the ruined stage. He saw the girl with the pink and white hair, his daughter. And he saw the young man with the sun-kissed hair, his whiskered cheeks, and the faint, residual golden energy flickering around him. Shanks's breath caught in his throat. His eternally calm demeanor was broken by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock, which quickly melted into something else, a complex, overwhelming wave of pride, regret, and awe. He was here. After all these years, his son was here. High on the now normal clock tower, the silencer stood, a motionless sentinel amidst the aftermath. They had witnessed everything. The manifestation of Tot Musica. The unconventional alliance. And the final, synchronized attack that had erased a reality-bending entity from existence. The black den mushi in their hand pulsed with an incoming thought message, a query from the highest authority. Report. The silencer's own thoughts were cold and precise as they formulated the response. Synchronization achieved. The subjects can merge the metaphysical properties of the Yuta no Mi with the raw energy of the mythical Zoan. This combination is capable of rewriting reality on a localized scale by attacking on both the physical and conceptual planes. They paused, letting the terrifying implication of that statement sink in. Lord Emu, your concerns were not just validated. They were an understatement. Recommending immediate escalation. The abomination protocol may need to be accelerated. The den mushi's eye closed, acknowledging the receipt of the most terrifying field report the world government had ever received. Chapter 4, Father, Son, and the World's Wrath. The world returned in pieces. First came the sounds, the gentle lapping of waves against the shore, the distant cry of a seagull, the stunned, collective murmur of thousands of people waking from a dream. Then came the smells, salt, ozone, and the sharp, acrid scent of pulverized stone and scorched metal. Naruto's consciousness swam up from a deep, black well of exhaustion, his limbs feeling like lead anchors. His first coherent thought was a single, urgent question, Yuta. He forced his eyes open. He was lying on the cool stone of the plaza, his head pillowed on something soft. He shifted, a groan escaping his lips, and realized his head was in Yuta's lap. She was awake, propped up against a large piece of debris, her breathing shallow but steady. One of her hands was resting on his chest, a fragile anchor in reality. The other was stroking his hair, her touch hesitant, as if she couldn't quite believe he was real. "You're an idiot," she whispered, her voice rough and cracked. Tears were tracking clean paths through the grime on her cheeks, but the look in her eyes was one of profound, bone-deep relief. Naruto managed a weak, lopsided grin. "Yeah, well," he rasped, his throat dry as sandpaper. "You're a trouble magnet. Guess we're even." The quiet moment was heavy with 12 years of unspoken words, a shared lifetime of loneliness culminating in this devastating, beautiful reunion. But it was a moment that could not last. The world was not done with them. A shadow fell over them. Naruto's senses, though dulled by exhaustion, screamed a warning. A presence, immense and familiar, stood over them. It was a pressure he'd felt only once before, as a child, a wave of haki so potent it could make the very air kneel in submission. He looked up, past the simple trousers and straw sandals, to a face he had only seen in faded photographs and his own fragmented memories. The man had a kind, weathered face, a faint stubble, and 3 distinctive scars over his left eye. But it was his eyes that held Naruto's gaze, sharp, intelligent, and currently filled with an emotion so complex it was impossible to name. A single tear traced a path from the corner of the man's eye into his red hair. "Shanks," Yuta breathed, her voice trembling. The legendary Emperor of the Sea, red-haired Shanks, knelt beside them. He didn't speak. He simply reached out a hand, his only hand, and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from Yuta's forehead. Then, his gaze shifted to Naruto. He looked at the whisker marks on his cheeks, the defiant blue of his eyes, so much like his mother's, and the raw, untamed power that still flickered around him like a dying flame. "You've grown, Naruto," Shanks said, his voice thick with a profound, aching pride. Before Naruto could formulate a reply, the rest of the world came crashing in. "Captain." The booming voice belonged to a mountain of a man with a graying topknot and a perpetually serious expression. Ben Beckman, first mate of the Red Hair Pirates, strode towards them, a rifle slung over his shoulder. His eyes took in the entire scene with a glance, the 2 exhausted youths, the unconscious admiral, the stunned marines, and the recovering straw hats. His gaze lingered on Naruto, a flicker of surprise and recognition in his sharp eyes. He was followed by the rest of the crew's senior officers. Yasop, a man with dreadlocks and a marksman's keen eyes, let out a low whistle. "He's the spitting image of her," he murmured to Lucky Roo, who was already gnawing on a massive leg of meat he'd produced from somewhere. "But that fire, that's all you, Captain." The arrival of a Yonko and his entire command crew had a polarizing effect on the plaza. The pirates in the crowd stared in awe and terror. The Marines, those who were still conscious, scrambled to their feet, their expressions a mixture of duty and primal fear. Vice Admiral Momonga, who had recovered enough to stand, drew his sabers, his face pale but resolute. "Red-haired Shanks." Momonga yelled, his voice strained. "By order of the world government, you are all under." Shanks didn't even look at him. He simply let out a soft sigh, a sound of weary disappointment. A wave of invisible pressure, subtle yet absolute, washed over the plaza. It wasn't the brute force hammer of his haki that could knock out 10,000 men. It was a quiet, suffocating command. "Be still." Every Marine froze. Their muscles locked, their weapons felt impossibly heavy, and the words died in their throats. It was the will of a king, not ordering them to sleep, but simply demanding their silence. "We're not here to fight," Shanks said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of an emperor. "We're here for our family." He turned his attention back to Naruto and Yuta. "But she's fading." He was right. Now that the adrenaline was gone, the toll of her power was becoming apparent. Yuta's face was ghostly pale, her breathing growing more ragged. The life force she had poured into her song, the very power that had defeated a demon king, had come at a catastrophic price. She was burning out from the inside. "I can help," Naruto said, pushing himself into a sitting position despite the protest of every muscle in his body. He placed his hands on Yuta's back. A gentle, warm, golden-orange light began to glow from his palms. It wasn't the explosive fire of his battle cloak, but the pure, undiluted life force energy of the Kyuubi, focused into a healing bomb. It was a technique he had perfected over years of brutal training, learning not just to weaponize his power, but to nurture with it. The effect was instantaneous. Color began to return to Yuta's cheeks. Her breathing steadied, the ragged gasps smoothing into a peaceful rhythm. The light from Naruto's hands flowed into her, a visible transfer of vitality that stabilized her rapidly fading life. Shanks watched, his expression one of pure astonishment. He knew of the Kyuubi fruit, of course. He had been the one to find it, intending it for his son as a last resort, a way for him to protect himself in a world that would want him dead. But he had only known of its destructive potential. To see it used with such control, to give life instead of taking it. Who trained you? Ben Beckman asked, his voice a low rumble. It was the most important question in the world right now. A boy with Shanks's blood, a mythical Zoan, and this level of mastery over his abilities did not simply happen. A man who owed my father a debt, Naruto answered, his focus still on Yuta. He called himself, the Iron Fist. Shanks's eyes widened slightly. He knew the name. A former Marine Vice Admiral, a master of all 6 Rokushiki forms and a hockey specialist who had once fought him to a standstill decades ago. A man who had vanished after a disagreement with the world government over their definition of justice. So that's where he'd gone. He'd taken his son. He taught me how to fight, Naruto continued, his voice quiet. My mother, she taught me why. The words hung in the air, a testament to a past Shanks was not privy to. With Yuta stabilized for the moment, the red-hair pirates moved with practiced efficiency. Hongo, their doctor, rushed forward with a medical kit, administering a nutrient-rich 4 to Yuta while giving Naruto a respectful, curious nod. The rest of the crew formed a loose, unbreachable perimeter, their mere presence a deterrent more effective than any wall. It was in this relative calm that the first real conversation between father and son took place. It didn't happen in a grand, dramatic confrontation. It happened quietly, amidst the wreckage, while the world held its breath around them. Naruto finally met Shanks's gaze, his own exhaustion-rimmed blue eyes holding a clarity that was unnerving. There was no rage, no childish tantrum, no screaming accusation of abandonment. There was only a quiet, resolute strength. Why? Naruto asked. It was the only question that mattered. Why leave him on a secluded island? Why let Yuta believe he and his crew were murderers? Why hide him from the world, and the world from him? Shanks looked at his son, truly looked at him, and saw not a boy demanding answers, but a man seeking understanding. He owed him that much. Your mother, she was a Tenryubito, Shanks said, his voice low and heavy, meant only for Naruto and Yuta to hear. She fled Mary Geos, disgusted by what her family, the Figureland family, represented. She wanted a life of freedom. I gave her that, for a time. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. A celestial dragon? The implications were staggering. When you were born, Shanks continued, his gaze distant, lost in a painful memory, you weren't just the son of a pirate. You were the child of a traitor god, carrying the blood of the founders of the world government. They would have hunted you, not to kill you, but to make you one of them. To raise you as a symbol, a weapon. And on top of that, he glanced at the faint orange energy still flickering around Naruto. That devil fruit. A power that can challenge the heavens. Leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was the only way to keep you free, to let you grow into the man you were meant to be, not the tool they wanted you to be. He looked at Yuta, his expression softening with regret. And Elegia, what happened here, that was my fault. I was trying to protect Yuta from the same government, from the power she couldn't control. I took the blame, became the monster in her story, so she could live a normal life. It was a choice made of love, but, it was the wrong one. A lie, no matter how well-intentioned, is still a lie. Naruto listened, absorbing every word. He processed the logic, the pain, the impossible choices his father had been forced to make. The anger he might have once felt, the resentment that could have festered in a lesser man, simply wasn't there. His training had been about more than fighting, it had been about mastering himself, his own emotions. He saw the truth in Shanks's eyes, the profound weight of his decisions. "You did what you thought was right," Naruto said finally, his voice clear and steady. The emotional clarity was a force in itself, more powerful than any hockey blast. "You carried that burden alone so we wouldn't have to." He pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly before finding his balance. He was taller than he'd been a moment ago, his presence more commanding. "But I'm not a child you need to hide anymore. I'm here now." He looked down at Yuta, who was watching him with wide, adoring eyes. His expression softened. "And I'm not leaving her side." That declaration, more than any feat of strength he had displayed, was what truly earned him his place. A wave of respect, silent and profound, washed over him from the veterans of the Red Hair Pirates. Ben Beckman gave a slow, deliberate nod of approval. Yasopp grinned, a genuine, proud smile. Shanks looked at his son, this man who stood before him, forged in a crucible he had created but had no part in, and felt a pride so fierce it almost brought him to his knees. He hadn't just survived. He had triumphed. This fragile piece was, of course, doomed. The world does not wait for family reunions. A news coup, one of the world government's journalistic birds, had been circling the island, its camera eyes capturing everything. The defeat of Kizaru. The arrival of Shanks. The son of the Yonko standing side by side with the infamous diva. By the next morning, the story had exploded across the globe. Newspapers were dropped on every island, from the tranquil villages of the East Blue to the warring territories of the New World. The headlines were sensational, world-shaking. A new emperor. Son of Red Hair Shanks revealed at Elegia. Admiral Kizaru defeated. Yonko alliance forms. Diva, Yuta and mythical Xian user wipe out Marine fleet. The reaction was immediate and seismic. In the fleet admiral's office at Marineford, Akainu slammed his fist on his desk, cracking the reinforced wood. Magma dripped from his knuckles. Shanks, that bastard, and his spawn, he seethed, the very air in the room simmering with his fury. Kizaru defeated. A new mythical Zoan. Issue the bounties. Now. I want the world to know what kind of threat we are facing. Deep in the dungeons of Impel Down, Doflamingo laughed from behind the bars of his cell, his maniacal cackle echoing through the stone halls. Fufufu. So the brat finally shows his face. Oh, this is getting interesting. The stage is being set for a war that will make Marineford look like a child's squabble. And on the seas, the world's most wanted man, Monkey D. Dragon, read the paper aboard the vessel of the Revolutionary Army, his expression unreadable behind the shadows of his cloak. The son of Shanks, and of Figureland, he murmured to himself. The gears of fate are turning faster than I anticipated. The bounties were issued that afternoon. They were not just numbers, they were declarations of war. Yuta's bounty, previously frozen, was reinstated and raised to a staggering 1.5 billion berries, recognizing her world-altering potential. And Naruto's first-ever bounty poster was plastered on every wall in the world. It was a candid shot, taken mid-battle, his face a mask of fierce determination, the golden Kyubi cloak blazing around him. Wanted, dead or alive Naruto D. Uzumaki, the golden fox, 3 billion berries. The number was an earthquake. A rookie bounty that dwarfed even the highest commanders of Yonko crews. It was a number that screamed one thing: this man is a threat on par with the emperors themselves. Back on Elegia, Yuta finally woke up, weak but lucid. She was in a clean bed in the infirmary of Shanks's ship, the Red Dragon. Naruto was asleep in a chair beside her, his head slumped forward, his breathing deep and even. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. The warmth, the simple reality of his presence, was the most comforting thing she had ever known. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at her, and a slow, tired smile spread across his face. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," she whispered back. They didn't need to say anything else. They held hands, the silence filled with a shared understanding. The promise they had made as children, a fantasy of peace and freedom, had been reforged in the fires of battle. It was no longer a dream. It was a grim, terrifying, and exhilarating reality. The world had declared war on them. And they were going to face it, together. In the hallowed, silent halls of Pangea Castle in Mary Geos, the 5 elders stood before the empty throne. The emergency meeting had been convened the moment the news from Elegia had broken. 3 billion berries for a first bounty. Akainu is losing his mind. This will only elevate the boy's status, the tall, blonde elder with the long mustache argued, pacing furiously. It is a necessary statement, countered the bald, sword-wielding elder. He defeated an admiral. Anything less would be a sign of weakness. Our primary concern is the synergy. Their combined power to warp reality, it's a power akin to the ancient weapons. The prophecy, the dark-skinned, dreadlocked elder murmured, his voice grave. The song that reshapes the world, and the sun that gives it life. This is too close to be a coincidence. Engaging the red-hair pirates directly is a fool's errand, the youngest-looking, Gorbachev-esque elder stated flatly. We would risk a two-front war if Straw Hat sides with them. We cannot afford that. Their argument was cut short by a voice that was not a voice. It was a presence, a cold, ancient thought that echoed in the chamber, emanating from the shadowed figure who sat upon the empty throne. Emu. The fruit users are the symptom. The bloodline is the disease, the distorted, chilling thought voice echoed. The Figureland blood runs through the boy. A family of traitors. Their sin must be purged. The 5 elders immediately fell silent, bowing their heads in deference. Send the seraphim. The new models, Emu commanded. And activate the Godslayer project. It is time they were reminded what happens to gods who fall from grace. In the shadows below the throne room, the silencer knelt on one knee. The porcelain mask was angled towards the floor in a gesture of perfect obedience. A new set of orders had been transmitted directly into their mind. They were no longer just an observer. They were now a hunter. And their prey had just been given a name. Chapter 5, The Road of Poneglyphs. The Red Dragon, flagship of the Red Hair Pirates, cut a regal path through the calm waters of the New World. A day had passed since the cataclysm at Elegia. The ship was a hive of quiet activity, the crew moving with the practiced ease of men who had sailed together for decades. The mood, however, was a strange cocktail of celebration and foreboding. They had reclaimed their captain's daughter and discovered a new, impossibly powerful ally in his son, but the world's response had been swift and thunderous. A 3 billion berry bounty was not a warning, it was a death sentence issued by the highest powers in the land. In the captain's quarters, a room that was surprisingly Spartan for a Yonko, the key players were assembled. The air was thick with the smell of aged wood, sea salt, and Hongo's antiseptic supplies. Yuta was propped up on a cot, sipping a warm broth, her strength slowly returning. Naruto sat on a crate beside her, a fresh black shirt stretched across his broad shoulders, his presence a silent, reassuring pillar. Across from them, Shanks stood before a large, unrolled map, his expression graver than Naruto had ever seen it. Ben Beckman leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, his gaze sharp and analytical. The bounties are a distraction, Shanks began, his voice low and serious. He tapped a finger on the newspaper lying on the table, the one with Naruto's blazing face on the front. This number isn't for bounty hunters. It's a signal to every power player in the world, the Marines, the other emperors, the Revolutionary Army. It's the world government announcing that you two, he gestured to Naruto and Yuta, are now a global priority threat. They won't just send admirals anymore. They will send their monsters. Let them come, Naruto said, his voice calm. There was no bravado in it, just a simple statement of fact. He had faced an admiral and won. He wasn't afraid. It's not that simple, kid, Ben Beckman interjected, his voice a gravelly rumble. The ones who sit at the top, the 5 elders and the one they answer to, they don't play by the same rules. They have things, weapons from the void century, that can kill gods. And right now, they think they're looking at 2 new gods. Shanks nodded grimly. He's right. Your synergy, the ability to affect reality itself, it's not just a powerful combination of devil fruits. It's the fulfillment of a prophecy they have spent 800 years trying to suppress. He unrolled a separate, ancient-looking scroll on the table. It was a rubbing, its characters faded and strange. This is from a poneglyph my crew found years ago. I never fully understood it, until now. He pointed to a section of the text. It speaks of the world's end, an age of silence where the world's dream, the devil fruits, the very will of the people, is unmade by a silent king. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The silent king. Emu. But it also speaks of a counter, Shanks continued, his finger tracing another line of characters. A golden sun, whose life burns with the fire of the dawn, and a silver moon, whose song reflects that light and gives it form. When the 2 are united, they will not just fight the silence, they will unveil the true dawn, the truth of the world. He looked from Naruto's blazing, sun-like aura to Yuta, whose power was to give emotion and will a tangible form, like the moon reflecting the sun's light. The connection was undeniable. The world government isn't just afraid you'll fight them, Shanks said, the gravity of his words settling over the room. They're terrified you will expose them. To counter what's coming, we can't just be strong. We need knowledge. We need the truth of the void century. We need the road poneglyphs. He unrolled the larger map of the new world. 3 of the 4 islands that pointed the way to Laugh Tale were marked, 1 in the territory of Kaido, 1 in the territory of Big Mom, and 1 on Zou. But Shanks pointed to a 4th, unmarked region of the map, a treacherous-looking archipelago shrouded in illustrated storm clouds. The 4th road poneglyph has been missing for centuries, Shanks explained. But my sources tell me it's not lost. It's hidden. It's on an island called Raiden's Maw, and it's under the protection of a man who wants nothing to do with the world. Who? Naruto asked. A former warlord, Ben Beckman answered. A man who resigned his post after seeing the depravity of the celestial dragons firsthand. He's powerful, disillusioned, and fiercely territorial. He guards the island with a power that earned it its name, the Rumble Fruit. Enaru. The self-proclaimed god who had been defeated by Luffy in the sky. He had returned from the moon, not as a conqueror, but as a recluse, his god complex shattered but his power undiminished. The Straw Hats are already on the path to Laugh Tale, Shanks said, a thoughtful look on his face. They just left Wano, so they're heading in the same general direction. A temporary alliance would be beneficial for all of us. And so, a plan was formed. A temporary grand fleet, an alliance of convenience and newfound friendship. Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates would act as the shield, running interference and drawing the world government's attention on the global stage. Luffy and the Straw Hats, already on their quest, would be the spearhead. And Naruto and Yuta, sailing on the newly repaired Crimson Whirlwind, would be the key, the ones to unlock the path forward. The journey to rendezvous with the Straw Hats and then on to Raiden's Maw was a classic New World adventure, a trial by fire for Naruto and Yuta's new partnership. The sea itself seemed to be testing them. They navigated whirlpools that could swallow islands whole, sailed through showers of razor-sharp hail, and outran waterspouts that reached to the heavens. Their massive, combined bounty also made them a magnet for every optimistic, foolish or desperate pirate crew in a 1,000-mile radius. It was during these skirmishes that their new dynamic was forged. A fleet of 12 bounty-hunting ships ambushed them in a thick fog. Cannons roared, and grappling hooks flew through the mist. Yuta, standing on the deck of the Crimson Whirlwind, didn't panic. She took a deep breath and began to sing. It wasn't a song of control or destruction. It was a clear, sharp, piercing melody. The sound waves, focused by her will, shot out like invisible blades, not cutting the ships, but the ropes of their sails. In an instant, the entire enemy fleet was dead in the water, their sails collapsing onto their decks. When a particularly large pirate captain, a man with a Zoan fruit that turned him into a giant boar, managed to board their ship, Naruto met him. He didn't use his Kyuubi cloak. He didn't need to. He met the boar's charge with a single, open palm, his arm coated in a thin, shimmering layer of golden haki. The impact was immense, but Naruto didn't budge. He absorbed and redirected the creature's momentum, spinning and throwing the half-ton beast off the ship and into the sea with a flick of his wrist. It was a display of pure, refined martial skill. But the most important developments happened during the quiet moments between the storms and the battles. They began to train together, not as master and student, but as equals exploring the synergy of their powers. Naruto taught Yuta control. Your power comes from your emotions, he explained one afternoon, as they sat on the deck under a clear blue sky. But you can't let them control you. Focus. Don't just release the sound. Shape it. Give it purpose. He'd set up a line of empty bottles on the railing. Yuta, concentrating, sang a single, sharp note. The sound wave shot out and shattered the first bottle. Good, Naruto praised. Now, try it again. But this time, don't shatter it. Just knock the cap off. She tried again and again, her frustration mounting as she kept obliterating the bottles. I can't do it. It's too much power. It's never too much power, Naruto corrected gently. It's not enough control. Feel the note before you sing it. See what you want it to do in your mind. He placed a hand on her shoulder. I know you can do this. His unwavering belief was a better teacher than any instruction manual. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and visualized the cap popping off. She sang a short, precise, staccato note. The sound was almost invisible, a tiny pulse of force that zipped across the deck and neatly flicked the cap off the third bottle, leaving the bottle itself untouched. Her eyes flew open, a brilliant, genuine smile lighting up her face. I did it. In turn, she taught him. Her deep, intuitive understanding of emotion gave her a unique insight into the nature of haki. Your observation haki is amazing, she told him as they sparred, his movements a blur she could barely track. You can feel their killing intent, you can predict their moves. But you're only listening to the surface level. What do you mean? He asked, pausing his fluid attacks. Haki is a manifestation of will. And will is driven by emotion, she explained. You feel their anger, so you know they'll attack. But what if you could feel the reason for their anger? Their fear? Their doubt? You're listening to the shout, Naruto. You need to learn to hear the whisper underneath it. She began to sing, a soft, analytical melody that helped focus his mind. She guided him, teaching him to push his senses past the surface layer of intent and into the subtle, emotional undercurrents of a person's spirit. Under her guidance, his already formidable observation haki evolved. He began to sense not just actions, but motivations. He could feel the hesitation in a liar's voice, the flicker of doubt in a confident foe, the bedrock of conviction in an ally. It was a level of perception that few in the world possessed. They talked. 4 hours. They talked about their lonely years, filling in the gaps of a shared childhood. He told her about his brutal training on the Isle of Whispering Winds, of the master who was more of a warden, and of the dream of a free sea that had kept him going. She told him about her crushing guilt, the weight of her lie, and the suffocating love of Gordon who had tried to protect her from her own power. They found in each other a solace, a perfect understanding that no one else could ever provide. The bond forged in childhood was now being tempered into something deeper, an unbreakable partnership of heart and soul. After a week of sailing, they rendezvoused with the Thousand Sunny. The meeting was less a formal alliance and more a chaotic, joyful reunion. Luffy, ecstatic to see his new friend, immediately challenged Naruto to an eating contest, which Naruto won by a narrow margin, much to Luffy's delighted frustration. The rest of the Straw Hats, having witnessed Naruto's power and his devotion to Yuta at Elegia, welcomed them with an easy camaraderie. Together, the two ships set a course for Raijin's Maw. The island was aptly named. As they approached, the sky grew dark, and the air crackled with electricity. A permanent, unnatural thunderstorm raged over the island, bolts of blue and white lightning striking the sea and the island's jagged peaks with relentless frequency. The island itself was a fortress of storm-blasted rock and petrified trees. "He's not exactly rolling out the welcome mat," Sanji observed, lighting a cigarette in the howling wind. "He knows we're here," Naruto said, his evolved haki feeling the immense, arrogant presence at the island's core. "He's waiting." They anchored the ships in a relatively calm bay, shielded by a large rock formation. Leaving the crews to guard the ships, a small shore party was formed: Naruto, Yuta, Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and Nico Robin, who was essential for reading the poneglyph. As they stepped onto the black, glassy shore, a voice boomed from the heavens, seeming to come from the thunder itself. "Insects," the voice declared, dripping with a bored, condescending arrogance. "You have crawled into the garden of a god. I have no time for the squabbles of the blue sea dwellers. State your purpose, and I may grant you a swift cremation." Luffy grinned. "Hey! I remember you. You're that weird earlobe guy." A vein throbbed on Eneru's forehead, miles away. "We're here for the road poneglyph," Naruto called out, his voice cutting through the wind. "We have no quarrel with you, Eneru. We're fighting a common enemy. The ones who call themselves gods in Mary Geos." There was a long pause, the only sound the crash of thunder. Then, Eneru's voice returned, laced with a cold fury. "Gods. There is only one God. And he has no allies." A bolt of lightning, thicker than a ship's mast, descended from the sky with impossible speed, aimed directly at the center of their group. It wasn't a warning shot. It was an execution. Naruto moved in a flash. He appeared in front of the group, his hands slamming together. "Sage art, scorch style, nimbus gale," he yelled. It was a technique learned from his mother's scrolls, a way of shaping his own energy. He exhaled a massive torrent of superheated wind that met the lightning bolt head-on. The two forces collided with a deafening sizzle, creating a massive, expanding dome of superheated plasma. The sheer force of the explosion sent everyone but Naruto stumbling backward. Naruto stood his ground in the aftermath, his coat smoldering, his expression grim. "I said we have no quarrel," he stated, his voice now carrying a dangerous edge. "But if you want to fight, I'll be happy to knock that tin crown off your head again." A figure descended from the stormy sky, riding a wave of pure electricity. It was Eneru, his lanky frame unchanged, the massive ring of drums on his back, his earlobes just as long as Luffy remembered. But his eyes, once filled with manic glee, were now cold and empty. "You dare challenge me in my own sky?" Eneru sneered. "You are a fool. I am lightning. I am judgment. I am God." "No," Naruto said, planting his feet. "You're just a man with a powerful devil fruit. And you're in our way." The battle for the final road poneglyph was about to begin. It was not a battle against evil, but against a disillusioned, broken deity who had long since abandoned the world. To win, Naruto would need more than power. He would need to break the god's conviction. Hidden on a lightning-scarred peak overlooking the bay, the Silencer watched the confrontation begin. They had arrived hours earlier, their movements as silent and undetectable as a change in barometric pressure. They made no move to intervene. Their orders were clear: observe, record, and if possible, secure the target's objective for their own purposes. In their hand, a strange, parasitic den mushy pulsed with a faint light. It was a unique creation of the Arbiter's science division. It didn't transmit sound or thought. It copied information. It was currently latched onto the island's natural energy field, waiting. Once Robin began to decipher the poneglyph, this creature would copy the text, feeding the secrets of the road poneglyph directly to the world government. The silencer focused on the standoff below. Eneru's Logia was powerful, but Naruto's energy was an unknown. This would be a valuable data point. Subject Alpha is engaging the former warlord, Eneru, the silencer transmitted. Objective is the road poneglyph. My secondary objective is proceeding as planned. The prophecy is unfolding. Recommending deployment of Seraphim Unit 07 to this quadrant as a contingency. The Godslayer project should have a proper field test. The silencer then melted back into the shadows of the rock, a patient, invisible predator waiting for the victor to claim their prize, unaware that they would be claiming it for someone else entirely. Chapter 6, Justice and Freedom. The battle against a self-proclaimed god was, for Naruto, disappointingly straightforward. Eneru was powerful, his Logia ability granting him dominion over the storm-racked island, but his fighting style was arrogant and crude. He believed himself untouchable, a fundamental flaw against an opponent who could touch the intangible. Naruto, his body coated in the thin, shimmering gold of his Haki-infused life force, moved through the ensuing storm of lightning like a phantom. Eneru's bolts, which could vaporize steel, sizzled and dispersed against his aura. The former god's mantra, a form of observation Haki, was impressive, allowing him to predict movements across the entire island, but Naruto's own newly honed senses were a step beyond. He wasn't just predicting Eneru's attacks, he was feeling the arrogant certainty behind them, the flicker of surprise when his attacks failed, and the growing seed of frustration. The fight was less a brawl and more a lesson. Naruto systematically dismantled Eneru's offense. He would redirect a lightning bolt with a casual swipe of his hand, Sora stepped through a 200 million volt discharge, and closed the distance with relentless pressure. He didn't even use his Rasengan. It was a pure display of Haki and Rokushiki, a statement that he didn't need his ultimate techniques to deal with a false deity. The final blow was almost anticlimactic. Eneru, enraged, transformed into his massive Raijin form, a towering giant of pure electricity. Naruto simply appeared before him, his hand glowing with a condensed sphere of golden armament Haki. He didn't punch. He placed his palm gently on the giant's chest. "It's over," Naruto said calmly. A devastating pulse of Haki erupted from his palm, an internal destruction technique that bypassed the Logia form and struck Eneru's true body within. The electrical giant convulsed, the light flickering violently before it imploded, leaving Eneru to fall from the sky, unconscious before he hit the ground. While Naruto handled the god, the rest of the group had their own roles. Sanji and Zoro, in a rare display of coordinated annoyance, dispatched the 4 automata priests who guarded the path to the summit. Luffy, immune to the electricity, had mostly just watched with a grin, occasionally shouting unhelpful advice like, "Just punch him really hard." It was Yuta who ended the conflict. As Naruto stood over the defeated Eneru, she began to sing. Her voice, clear and devoid of any combative intent, carried on the wind. It was a soft, mournful melody, a song about loneliness, about the pain of being elevated so high above others that you can no longer connect with them. It was Eneru's story, a story she understood all too well. The song calmed the raging storm. The thunder softened, the lightning ceased, and for the first time in years, a ray of actual sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the black, rocky island. Eneru, stirring on the ground, heard the song, and the cold arrogance in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of something ancient and painful, sorrow. He didn't get up to fight again. He simply listened, and for the first time, did not feel like a god, but just a man, alone on an island in the sky. With the guardian pacified, Nico Robin was free to approach the massive, crimson stone hidden deep within a cave at the island's peak. She ran her hands over the ancient characters, her expression a mixture of academic reverence and grim understanding. After several long minutes of silence, she turned to the group. "It's the final piece," she confirmed, her voice low. "It points to the location of the final island." Laugh Tail. The victory was short-lived. Just as Robin finished her transcription, Naruto's head snapped up, his enhanced observation haki screaming a new kind of warning. It wasn't the arrogant energy of Eneru, nor the raw power of a Sea King. This was cold, sharp, and brutally efficient. It felt like 1,000 scalpels aimed at his heart. "We've got company," Naruto said, his voice dropping the easy confidence it held moments before. "Marines. A lot of them. And they're different." He was right. Emerging from the sea on all sides of Raiden's Maw was a fleet of sleek, gray battleships, their design unfamiliar. They moved with a silent, deadly speed, cutting through the water without a wake. And at the head of this fleet, on the prow of the lead ship, stood a man who radiated an aura of chilling, absolute conviction. He was a young vice admiral, his name already a whispered legend in the halls of Marineford, Kaido, known to his subordinates as the Steel Fist. He wore a crisp, white officer's coat over a black tactical uniform. His face was sharp and intelligent, his dark hair cut in a severe military style. He wasn't a giant like the other admirals, nor did he possess a famously flashy devil fruit. What he possessed was a mind like a steel trap and a belief in absolute justice so pure it was terrifying. Naruto D. Uzumaki. Yuta. Straw Hat Luffy, Kaido's voice boomed across the water, amplified not by a den mushi, but by a series of floating metallic drones that projected his voice with perfect clarity. "You are all in violation of a dozen international laws. But that is not why I am here." His ships were not positioning for a bombardment. Instead, massive metallic plates extended from their hulls, crashing into the shores of Raiden's Maw and locking into place. In minutes, they had formed a perfect, interlocking metal wall around the entire island, a cage from which there was no escape. "I am here because you," Kaido said, his gaze locking onto Naruto, "represent the greatest threat to world peace, the lie of absolute freedom. Your freedom is the freedom of the strong to prey on the weak. It is the freedom to burn villages, topple kingdoms, and plunge the world into chaos for your own selfish desires. My justice is the order that protects the innocent from men like you. Today, that order will be enforced." Luffy bristled. "What's this guy's problem? We just want to have an adventure." "He's a true believer," Naruto murmured, his eyes narrowed. This was infinitely more dangerous than Eneru. This wasn't a battle for a poneglyph, it was a battle for the soul of the world. "Separate them," Kaido commanded, his voice cold and precise. From the walls of the cage, massive metallic arms shot out, powered by electromagnets. They didn't target the pirates. They targeted the island itself. The arms slammed into the ground, tearing up huge sections of the island, creating chasms and new walls, instantly reshaping the battlefield. The ground beneath Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji crumbled, dropping them into a newly formed canyon, separating them from Naruto, Yuta, and Robin. "Zoro! Sanji! Let's go!" Luffy yelled, already preparing to bounce back up. But before he could, a volley of sea prism stone nets shot from the canyon walls, forcing them back. Simultaneously, Kaido himself moved. He didn't leap. The metal deck plate beneath his feet reshaped itself into a high-speed transport, rocketing him towards Naruto's position on the summit. He arrived in seconds, landing softly, the metal flowing back into the wall behind him. "My quarrel is with the source of the ideological infection," Kaido stated, his hand resting on the hilt of a simple, unadorned katana. "The rest are merely symptoms." He had successfully isolated his true targets. This was Kaido's power. The Kinzoku no Mi, the metal fruit. An awakened paramecia that gave him absolute control over any metal he touched, allowing him to reshape it, manipulate it, and even granted a form of simple, autonomous instruction. The entire shipyard turn-cage was now his personal weapon. "Yuta, Robin, stay back," Naruto ordered, stepping in front of them. He cracked his knuckles, a low growl building in his chest. "This one's mine." The fight began. It was a brutal spectacle of opposing philosophies. Naruto's style was fluid, powerful, hockey-centric, a force of nature. Kaido's was cold, calculated, and ruthlessly efficient. He didn't fight like a man, but like a machine. Naruto charged, his fist wreathed in golden haki. Kaido didn't even draw his sword. He simply raised a hand, and the metal ground erupted. A wall of solid steel, 10 feet thick, shot up from the floor, blocking Naruto's path. Naruto didn't stop. He punched. His fist, glowing with the power of the sun, slammed into the wall. It didn't just break it, it vaporized the point of impact, blasting a hole through the solid metal with a deafening roar. Naruto shot through the hole, but Kaido was already gone. The Vice Admiral was hovering in the air, supported by a platform of floating metal drones that moved with silent, impossible grace. "Brute force is the tool of the simple-minded," Kaido stated calmly. He gestured with his hand, and the battlefield became a living nightmare of metal. The walls of the cage sprouted cannons that fired sea-prism stone projectiles. The ground churned, metallic tendrils lashing out like whips. Dozens of autonomous steel soldiers, armed with razor-sharp blades, rose from the floor and charged at Naruto from all directions. Naruto was a whirlwind of destruction, but he was on the defensive. He was forced to use his full Kyuubi transformation, not just the cloak, but a humanoid fox form, a blazing avatar of orange-gold energy with sharp claws and teeth. The form, reminiscent of the Baryon mode his ancestor once used, gave him the speed and power necessary to smash through the metal soldiers and dodge the cannon fire. He was a force of pure, untamed freedom against a world of cold, unyielding order. While Naruto was occupied, Kaido turned his attention to his secondary target. "The song that sows chaos," he murmured, his eyes locking on Yuta. A dozen sharp, metallic spears coalesced from the floor and shot towards her. Yuta didn't flinch. She had faced down a demon king, a zealot in a white coat was not going to make her cower. She sang. A sharp, disorienting melody, a series of complex frequencies designed to interfere with inorganic material. The spears heading for her suddenly wobbled in mid-air, their trajectory thrown off. They veered wildly, half of them embedding themselves in the wall, the other half turning and shooting back towards Kaido's other metal drones, causing them to spark and short-circuit. "Your power is impressive," Kaido acknowledged, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "But like all pirate tricks, it relies on misdirection. Justice is direct." He gathered a massive sphere of jagged metal shards above his head, compressing it into a single, dense projectile aimed at Yuta. This attack was pure kinetic force, something her song couldn't easily misdirect. Naruto saw it. He was engaged with 3 giant metal golems, but his senses were locked on Yuta. He roared, his 9 energy tails lashing out, obliterating the golems in a single, sweeping strike. But he was too far away to intercept the projectile. Then he saw them. A small group of Enaru's automata priests, the ones Sanji and Zoro had only disabled, were cowering near Yuta, caught in the crossfire. They were machines, yes, but they were also sentient, and they were terrified. Kaido didn't care. To him, they were acceptable losses in the pursuit of his target. The projectile shot forward. In that split second, Naruto made a choice. He didn't try to block it. He didn't try to counter it. He used Zoro, pushing his transformed body to its absolute limit, and appeared directly in the projectile's path, his back to the attack, shielding not just Yuta, but the cowering robots behind her. The impact was sickening. The dense sphere of metal, traveling at incredible speed, slammed into his back. Even in his Kyuubi form, the force was immense. The golden aura flickered violently, and Naruto was driven to one knee, a choked gasp of pain escaping his lips. He had taken the full force of the blow to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The act was so pure, so selfless, it was a glitch in Kaido's perfect, ordered world. He faltered, his cold certainty shaken for the first time. He had built his entire philosophy on the idea that men like Naruto were selfish creatures of chaos. But this was the act of a hero. This was an act of true justice. Is this truly the face of chaos? The seed of doubt was planted. That moment of hesitation was all Naruto needed. He surged back to his feet, his blue eyes blazing with a righteous fury. The golden energy around him condensed, burning brighter than ever before. He wasn't just fighting for himself or for Yuta anymore. He was fighting for the very idea that freedom and protection were not mutually exclusive. He lunged forward, no tricks, no techniques, just a single, haki-wreathed fist aimed at the man, not his creations. Kaido, his concentration broken, tried to erect another wall, but he was too slow. Naruto's punch connected with the Vice Admiral's chest. The impact shattered Kaido's personal Tekai defense and sent him flying backward, crashing through the metal wall of his own cage and into the sea beyond. Naruto stood, panting, his transformation receding, leaving him bruised and bleeding but victorious. He hadn't killed him. He had broken his ultimate weapon and, more importantly, his conviction. As Kaido was fished from the water by his stunned subordinates, Naruto's voice, though strained, carried across the water. Justice that needs to sacrifice the innocent isn't justice, he called out. It's just an excuse. The remaining marine ships, their commander defeated and their cage broken, began a hesitant retreat. The battle was over. But the war was not. On a high peak, unnoticed by anyone, the silencer watched the Marines withdraw. They had observed the entire battle, their analytical mind processing every detail of Kaido's awakened fruit and Naruto's unwavering resolve. Kaido was a failure. And in the world of the celestial arbiters, failure was a disease that required purging. The silencer raised a hand, their gloved fingers pointed at the distant figure of the defeated Vice Admiral on the deck of his ship. A strange, silent, black energy, a void that seemed to consume light and sound, began to coalesce in their palm. It was the power of the arbiters, the anti-devil fruit energy. An execution from miles away. A failure of the system must be purged, the silencer thought, the black energy crackling with silent hunger. Before they could unleash the blow, a terrifying pressure descended on the mountaintop. It felt like the sky itself was falling. A bolt of black and red lightning, a pure, physical manifestation of Conqueror's haki, slammed into the rock just feet from the silencer. It wasn't an attack meant to hit, it was a warning shot, an alpha predator baring its teeth. The silencer froze, their head snapping towards the source of the attack. On the deck of the Red Dragon, which had been silently approaching under the cover of the chaos, stood Shanks. He had one hand resting on the hilt of his sword, Griffin, and his eyes were locked directly on the silencer's position, his gaze cutting through miles of ocean and rock. He could see them. The message was brutally, unequivocally clear, I see you. I know what you are. And you are not welcome in this game. The silencer held Shanks's gaze for a long, silent moment. Their mission profile did not include engaging a Yonko directly. With a fluidity that defied physics, they melted back into the shadows of the rock and vanished without a trace, the black energy in their palm dissipating. The true enemy had, for the first time, shown their hand. And they had been forced to retreat. The game had just escalated, and the stakes were now higher than ever. Chapter 7, The Godslayer's Shadow. The warning shot Shanks fired at the hidden assassin sent a ripple of dread through everyone powerful enough to feel it. It was a clash of haki on a level that warped the air, a silent conversation between titans held across miles of open ocean. On the shores of Raijin's Maw, Naruto felt the oppressive wave of his father's conqueror's haki and the chilling, void-like presence it had targeted. He looked to the distant peak where the assassin had been, his observation haki sensing only a lingering cold spot where the creature had stood. What was that? Yuta asked, her hand tightening on his arm. She had felt it too, a sliver of absolute nothingness that had made her blood run cold. The real enemy, Naruto answered grimly, his eyes still fixed on the empty mountaintop. Not a marine following orders. Not a disillusioned god. Something else. Something older. Aboard the Red Dragon, Shanks stood with Ben Beckman, his expression as hard as granite. The Arbiters, he said, his voice a low growl. Imu's personal hounds. They're not just watching anymore. They're hunting. To try and execute a vice-admiral in broad daylight. Ben murmured, taking a long drag from his cigarette. They're getting sloppy. Or desperate. Desperate, Shanks confirmed. Naruto and Yuta's synergy. It has them spooked. And now, we have the location of Laugh Tale. He looked at the rubbing of the final road poneglyph that Robin had passed to his crew. All the pieces are on the board. They know we're nearing the endgame. The revelation was a catalyst. The fragmented alliance, once a thing of convenience, solidified into a unified front. The enemy was no longer the faceless world government, but a specific, terrifying entity, Imu and the celestial arbiters, the silent rulers of the world. And their goal was not conquest, but erasure. Shanks unfurled the poneglyph rubbing from Raijin's maw alongside the one he'd recovered years ago. Robin, her face pale with the weight of her translation, pointed to a recurring set of characters on both stones. It's a prophecy and a warning, she explained, her voice hushed. The silent king, who sits on the empty throne, it says they will bring about the Great Purification, an event that will unmake the world's dream. It describes a power that can sever the connection between a soul and the sea's devils. Sever the connection. Sanji breathed. You mean, it can erase devil fruit powers? Robin nodded grimly. Permanently. And the prophecy calls the wielder of this power the Godslayer. The name hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. A power that could strip a Logia of their element, a Zoan of their transformation, a Paramecia of their world-altering gift. It was the ultimate weapon in a world defined by such abilities. It was then that the sky, which had just cleared, began to tear open. There was no sound, no warning. A black, geometric rift, like a crack in glass, appeared in the heavens above the combined fleet of the Red Hair Pirates and the Straw Hats. From this tear in reality, something descended. It was humanoid, but terrifyingly perfect. It had the form of a young boy with white hair, dark skin, and large, black wings. A green flame flickered constantly above its back. It was a seraphim, one of the world government's new weapons. But this one was different from the models they had encountered before. Its eyes were not the blank stare of a machine, but the cold, calculating eyes of a specific, legendary figure. Its genetic template was obvious to anyone who knew the stories. This was a seraphim modeled on the world's strongest swordsman, Dracul Mihawk. Zoro's hand flew to the hilt of his katanas, his entire body trembling with a mixture of rage and a swordsman's thrill. What is that? But the seraphim was just the overture. From the rift, a second figure emerged, descending with the slow, deliberate grace of a true monarch. This was no machine. This was a being of flesh and blood, cloaked in robes of pure, light-devouring black. Their face was hidden in the deep shadows of a hood, but their presence was absolute. It was a gravity well of power, a crushing pressure that made the very sea around them seem to bow. This was an Archon. One of Imu's 3 direct disciples. By order of the Silent King, the Archon's voice echoed, deep and resonant, yet utterly devoid of emotion. The anomalies known as the Golden Sun and the Silver Moon are to be retrieved for purification. All who interfere will be erased. The Archon raised a hand. Darkness, a tangible, physical blackness, swirled around it, more potent and absolute than anything even Blackbeard could conjure. This was not the Yami Yami no Mi. This was its origin, the primordial void from which that power was just a pale imitation. Then, they did something that defied all known laws of this world. The Archon clenched their fist, and a spherical zone of utter silence, a field of shimmering distortion about 50 meters wide, expanded from their body. "What is this?" Luffy yelled, his voice sounding strangely thin. He tried to stretch his arm to punch the descending seraphim, but his arm simply didn't stretch. It remained stubbornly normal. He looked down at his own body in confusion. The rubbery feeling was gone. Aboard the Red Dragon, chaos erupted. Devil Fruit users across the fleet suddenly found their powers flickering or vanishing entirely. Buggy, who had been trailing the fleet hoping for glory, suddenly found his separated body parts falling uselessly to the deck. The Archon's silence was real. It was the Godslayer ability. A localized field that nullified Devil Fruit powers. Yuta tried to sing, to unleash a wave of sonic power, but only a normal, powerless, if beautiful, melody came out. Her connection to the Yuta world was severed. She was just a girl. But as the field washed over Naruto, something different happened. The fiery Kyuubi cloak he had instinctively begun to summon sputtered, the flames shrinking and flickering like a dying candle. The connection to the fruit, to the entity of the Nine Tails, was being suppressed. But the energy itself, the raw, golden life force that he called chakra, did not vanish. It was his own life energy, a part of his very soul, merely amplified by the fruit. The fruit was the key, but he was the engine. He could still feel it, a raging inferno deep within him, now trapped and screaming to be let out. His haki, a product of his own will, was completely unaffected. His rokushiki, a product of pure physical mastery, was as sharp as ever. "So this is it," Naruto grunted, rolling his shoulders. The God-Slayer. The battle was instant and desperate. The Mihawk Seraphim, unaffected by the nullification field as it was a pure machine, drew its massive black blade, a perfect copy of Yoru, and fired a sword beam that dwarfed the originals. It was a slash of green energy that threatened to cut the entire fleet in half. Shanks moved. He drew Griffin, his blade glowing with a crimson-black aura of Conqueror's haki. "Divine departure," he roared, unleashing his own devastating slash. The two world-breaking attacks met in the middle of the sea, creating a titanic explosion that parted the clouds and sent a tsunami racing outwards. While Shanks engaged the Seraphim, the Archon descended towards the Crimson Whirlwind, their target clear. Luffy, now a regular, non-rubber boy but still a master of all three forms of haki, leaped into the air. "Gomu Gomu no Red Rock," he yelled out of pure instinct, his fist coated in the black and red of advanced Conqueror's haki. He was no longer made of rubber, but his haki was just as potent. He was a brawler of immense power, devil fruit or no. His haki-clad fist slammed into the Archon. The Archon simply raised a hand, and a vortex of darkness swallowed the attack whole. "Your will is strong, Straw Hat," the Archon said dismissively. "But it is an unrefined tool." With a flick of their wrist, a wave of gravitational force erupted from the darkness, slamming into Luffy and sending him rocketing down into the sea with the force of a meteor. This was their power. The primordial darkness of the Yami Yami no Mi, a force that could control gravity and absorb anything, combined with the God-Slayer's nullification field. It was an unbeatable combination. Naruto knew he couldn't win a battle of esoteric powers. He had to rely on what was truly his. "Yuta, get below deck," he ordered. He shot forward, using Sora to appear directly in front of the Archon, his leg a blur as he unleashed a tempest kick. The Archon casually raised an arm, and the blade of air was absorbed into the black robes. "A futile gesture," the Archon intoned. They reached out a hand, and a crushing gravity pulled Naruto towards them. But Naruto had anticipated this. He slammed his feet onto the deck, using Tekai to root himself, and channeled his trapped chakra into his limbs. His strength magnified tenfold. He fought against the pull, his muscles screaming, the deck of his ship groaning under the strain. "My turn," Naruto snarled. He pushed off, his speed explosive, and began a relentless assault of pure martial arts, every strike infused with the highest grade of armament hockey. It was a storm of punches, kicks, and finger pistols, a whirlwind of Rokushiki refined to its absolute peak. The Archon was forced to defend, swatting away the attacks with hands coated in darkness. For the first time, a flicker of surprise entered their posture. Naruto was faster and stronger than they had anticipated, even without his Zoan abilities. His raw physical prowess and hockey mastery were on a level that rivaled the greatest fighters in the world. But it wasn't enough. The Archon found an opening. As Naruto launched a kick, the Archon let it land, absorbing the force, and simultaneously grabbed Naruto's leg. Insolent gnat. A wave of absolute darkness surged up Naruto's leg, and the Archon's other hand shot forward, aiming a palm strike at Naruto's chest. This was no ordinary strike, it was infused with the God-Slayer energy, a blow designed to permanently sever his connection to the Kyuubi. Suddenly, a new song pierced the air. It was Yuta. She hadn't fled. She was standing on the deck, singing a desperate, defiant song. It had no supernatural power, but it was filled with her love, her fear, her absolute belief in Naruto. It was a song for him, and him alone. The song resonated with the trapped chakra inside Naruto. His own life force, which had been raging against its cage, found a focal point. It surged through his body, not as the Kyuubi's cloak, but as an extension of his own will. Just as the Archon's killing blow was about to land, Naruto's eyes blazed with a new, terrifying light. His golden-orange chakra, infused with his own conqueror's haki, erupted from his body, not as a cloak, but as a raw, unstable aura of pure power. It was no longer the Kyuubi's power. It was his power. This was a new state, a desperate fusion of his life force and his indomitable will. A Sun Eater mode. His haki became so potent it was a physical force, a golden-red aura of pure destruction that physically tore at the Archon's darkness, causing it to hiss and recede like it was being burned by acid. The Archon's hand stopped an inch from his chest, held back by the sheer, crushing pressure of Naruto's will made manifest. "Get your hands off me!" Naruto roared, his voice distorted by the sheer power flowing through him. He grabbed the Archon's arm and, with a surge of strength, shattered the bones within it. The Archon let out their first sound of pain, a sharp, surprised hiss. Naruto then delivered a single, devastating punch to the Archon's chest, a blow infused with this new, volatile energy. The impact shattered the Archon's defenses. They were launched backward, a streak of black against the sky, coughing up not blood, but wisps of pure darkness. They had been wounded. Their hood fell back, revealing the face within. It was a face of androgynous, ageless beauty, with eyes that were black voids and a chillingly calm expression that was now marred by shock and fury. They looked at their shattered arm, then at Naruto, who was panting, his new aura flickering dangerously. They had underestimated him. They had underestimated the power of the human spirit, the bond between the two targets. The Archon reached into their robe and pulled out a small, black prism. They crushed it. A signal. "The mission is compromised," they said, their voice now laced with cold anger. "The vessel is unstable. Retrieval is no longer the primary objective." They had come for a capture. Now, they were sanctioned to kill. The Archon raised their good hand, and a miniature black hole, a sphere of absolute gravity and darkness, began to form, aimed at Yuta. If they couldn't retrieve her, they would erase her. Naruto saw the attack forming. He knew he was running on fumes, that his Sun Eater mode was burning his own life force as fuel. He wouldn't reach her in time. But he didn't have to. Gum gum. A roar from above. Luffy, recovered and furious, had been launched into the air by Shanks. He was still in the nullification field, but his fist was coated in a layer of haki so thick it was like a black gauntlet. Rock Gatling. A storm of haki-infused fists rained down on the Archon, not giving them the chance to launch their attack. Simultaneously, a bolt of red and black lightning shot past Luffy, Shanks, having disengaged from the seraphim, was joining the fray, his blade aimed at the Archon's neck. This was it. A combined assault from two of the world's strongest hockey users, and Naruto, whose own power was an anomaly they couldn't account for. Cornered, the Archon made a choice. They abandoned their attack on Yuta and detonated the darkness around them in a massive, concussive wave that blasted all three of their attackers back. They then dissolved into a swirling shadow and retreated back towards the rift in the sky, the wounded seraphim following suit. "This is not over, son of Shanks," the Archon's voice echoed from the rift before it sealed shut. "The Silent King's judgment is inevitable. The world you know will be unmade." The battle was over. The enemy had retreated. But the cost was immense. As the adrenaline faded, Naruto's Sun Eater mode collapsed. The brilliant golden-red aura vanished, and he crumpled to the deck, his body smoking, his life force nearly extinguished. The power he had unleashed had burned through him like a wildfire. Yuta rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. "Naruto! Naruto, wake up!" He was unconscious, his breathing shallow, his heartbeat faint. Hongo, the red-hair crew's doctor, was there in an instant, his face grim. "His life force, it's shredded. It's like he's aged 50 years in 5 minutes. Medical science can't fix this. He's burning out from the inside." The victory felt like a funeral. They had wounded a god, but in doing so, their own sun had been extinguished. From Imu's perspective, the world was a map, and they were its master. The Archon, kneeling before the empty throne, reported their failure, their shattered arm already regenerating through some dark art. Imu was not angry. Their ancient, unknowable mind processed the new information with cold logic. The sun has begun to burn itself out. An acceptable outcome, the silent voice echoed in the throne room. The Archon's failure had revealed a critical weakness in their foe. Naruto's ultimate power was self-destructive. Imu's gaze, unseen by any, shifted to a different part of the chamber. There, floating in a crystal prism, was another figure. A woman with dark hair, a prisoner held in stasis. The former warlord, Boa Hancock, captured months earlier. Imu had not been collecting warlords for sport. They had been collecting keys. The moon is now unprotected, Imu thought, a plan centuries in the making reaching its final, terrible stages. Let them come. Let them exhaust themselves trying to save him. The final purification awaits at the throne of the world. Their plan was never just to kill Naruto. It was to break him, to lure him into a final, unwinnable confrontation on their own terms. The attack had been a test, a feint. And it had worked perfectly. Chapter 8, A New Era's Dawn. The infirmary of the Red Dragon was a place of suffocating silence. The usual sounds of a pirate ship, the creaking of wood, the boisterous laughter of the crew, the cry of gulls, were absent here, replaced by the soft, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor that was growing steadily, terrifyingly slower. Naruto lay on the central cot, still and pale, a ghost of the vibrant man he had been. And 4 drip fed him nutrients. Hongo had wrapped his wounds, but these were futile gestures. The damage wasn't to his body, it was to his soul. His life force, the very chakra that defined him, was guttering like a candle in a hurricane. His Sun Eater mode had been a desperate gamble, a pact made with his own mortality, and the bill had come due. The Kyuubi's legendary healing, which could mend shattered bones and ruptured organs in moments, was useless here. It could not regenerate a spirit that had been burned as fuel. Yuta sat beside him, holding his hand. It was cold. She hadn't left his side in the 12 hours since the battle. She had watched Shanks, Ben Beckman, and even Luffy come in, their usual indomitable spirits replaced by a heavy, helpless gloom. They had faced down emperors and gods, but they were powerless against this. They couldn't punch death. Hongo delivered the final verdict, his voice heavy with defeat. His internal fire is going out. At this rate, he has maybe another day. I'm sorry. There's nothing more I can do. As the doctor left, Yuta stared at Naruto's still face. The whisker marks on his cheeks seemed fainter, the life behind them fading. She saw the boy who had made her a promise, the man who had stood against an admiral for her, the hero who had shielded her with his own body. He had burned himself out to keep her safe, to keep their dream alive. She refused to let it end like this. A world without his blindingly bright smile, without his unwavering belief in her, was not a world she wanted to live in. Her eyes hardened with a desperate, terrifying resolve. If his fire was going out, she would reignite it with her own. She leaned over him, her hand still clutching his. And she began to sing. It was not a song of power. It was not a battle hymn or a song of control. It was a lullaby, the first one her mother had ever sung to her, a soft, gentle melody filled with a love so pure it was heartbreaking. As she sang, she poured her entire being into the music. Not just her emotion, but her own life force, the very essence of the Yuta Yuta no Mi, the energy of the world's song. A faint, silvery light began to glow around her, a stark contrast to Naruto's fading gold. The light flowed from her, down her arm, and into their joined hands. It was a direct transfer. His life for hers. The heart monitor, which had been slowing, began to tick faster, matching the rhythm of her song. But a new, frantic beeping started from a monitor Hongo had attached to her, her own life signs were plummeting. Yuta, stop. Shanks burst into the room, his face a mask of horror. He knew what she was doing. He had seen this kind of life force transfer before, a forbidden art that always ended with a corpse. You'll kill yourself. He did it for me, she said, not stopping her song, her eyes never leaving Naruto's face. It's my turn. But as her life force poured into him, something unexpected happened. The silver energy of her song met the dying, golden embers of his chakra. They didn't just mix. They resonated. It was the same synergy they had discovered when fighting taught Musica, the harmony of the sun and moon, but this time it was intimate, desperate, and pure. Her energy didn't just replace his, it acted as a catalyst, a tuning fork for his chaotic, burned-out spirit. His raging, self-destructive power, which had been tearing him apart from the inside, began to stabilize. Her song provided a structure, a melody for his chaotic life force to follow. The silver and gold light swirled together, intertwining like threads in a tapestry, forming a perfect, harmonious loop. Her song fueled his fire, and his fire, in turn, sustained her song. The glow intensified, filling the room with a light that was neither silver nor gold, but a brilliant, warm white. Naruto's body convulsed on the cot. He took a sharp, deep breath, the first he had taken in hours, as if surfacing from a deep ocean. The heart monitors for both of them began to even out, syncing up into a single, steady, powerful rhythm. The light faded, and silence returned. Yuta, utterly exhausted, slumped forward, her head resting on his chest, fast asleep but alive. Her breathing was deep and even. Naruto's hand, which had been so cold, was now warm, his fingers instinctively tightening around hers. A moment later, his eyes fluttered open. The blue was back. Not dim or clouded, but as vivid and clear as a summer sky. He looked at Yuta sleeping on his chest, then at his own hand, intertwined with hers. He could feel it, a new, permanent connection. A quiet, constant hum of her presence in the back of his mind, a gentle song that harmonized with the thrum of his own spirit. Their souls were now bound together. He looked up and saw his father standing in the doorway, his one hand covering his mouth, his shoulders shaking with silent, relieved sobs. The dust settled in the days that followed. The alliance, forged in the crucible of battle against a god-tier foe, was now an unbreakable bond. They had a clear enemy, Imu and the Celestial Arbiters. They had a clear goal, reach Laugh Tale, uncover the truth of the Void Century, and confront the Silent King before the world was unmade. The path was no longer just about finding a treasure or fulfilling a dream, it was about fighting a final, desperate war for the dawn. The great fleet separated, their purposes now aligned but their paths diverging. Luffy and the Straw Hats, with a copy of the final poneglyph rubbing, would continue their journey. Their quest for the One Piece was now inextricably linked to the fate of the world. Tell Naruto to get strong. I'm gonna be king of the pirates, and I'll need a good rival when I get there. Luffy had declared with a massive grin before the Thousand Sunny sailed off towards the horizon. Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates had their own role to play. They were a global power, a king on the world's chessboard. They would move to counter the world government's forces, to divert the Marines, and to create the opening that Naruto and Luffy would need to reach their final destination. The next time we meet, son, Shanks had said, placing a hand on Naruto's shoulder, his eyes filled with a father's pride, it will be at the end of the road. Naruto and Yuta had their own path. They were no longer just the son and daughter of a Yonko, accessories to a greater power. They were a force in their own right. The Golden Fox, and, the Diva, new, unpredictable power couple on the world stage. Their relationship, which had begun as a childhood promise and been rekindled in battle, had now been forged into a symbiotic partnership. They were two halves of a whole, their strengths and weaknesses perfectly complementing each other. In the final scene, they stood together on the deck of the Crimson Whirlwind. The ship was repaired, its sails full. It no longer flew the flag of the Red Hair Pirates. A new flag snapped in the wind from its mast, one of their own design, a stylized, nine-tailed golden fox, its tails intertwined with a single, elegant silver musical note. They were not alone. Several other ships had joined them, forming a small, elite flotilla. There was a Kuja ship, a gift from a recovering Boa Hancock, who, after being freed from her crystal prison by the Revolutionary Army during the chaos at Mary Geos, had pledged her allegiance not to Luffy, but to the man who had helped break the system that had imprisoned her. There was a sleek, fast vessel crewed by former revolutionaries and liberated slaves who saw Naruto and Yuta not as pirates, but as liberators. They were the seeds of a new kind of fleet, one bound not by hierarchy, but by a shared ideal. Yuta stood beside Naruto at the helm, the sea breeze catching her hair. The haunted, pained look that had shadowed her for so long was gone, replaced by a calm, happy confidence. She looked every bit the queen she was meant to be. So, where to first, Captain? She asked, a playful, genuine smile gracing her lips. It was the first time she had called him that, and the word was filled with affection and respect. Naruto grinned, his eyes blazing with a life and determination that burned brighter than ever before. His near-death experience had not broken him, it had tempered him, leaving him stronger, his power now fully his own and forever linked to hers. He looked out at the endless expanse of blue, at the horizon that held both their promised adventure and their final enemy. He pointed forward. To the end of the world, he said, his voice ringing with a charisma that made the very air vibrate. We've got a new era to build. The Crimson Whirlwind and its fledgling fleet surged forward, slicing through the waves, sailing into the unknown. They were sailing towards Laugh Tale, towards the final war, towards the dawn of a new age they would create together. Far away, in a hidden base buried deep within the earth, the world's most wanted man received a report. A figure cloaked in white, their face hidden by a featureless porcelain mask, knelt before Monkey D. Dragon. It was the Silencer. The targets are united, the Silencer reported, their voice a modulated, unrecognizable monotone. They are heading for the final island. Imu has revealed their hand and their ultimate weapon. The prophecy of the Godslayer is real. Dragon stared at the map of the world, his expression thoughtful and grim. And the Archon? Wounded. And they revealed their nature. Imu's plan to lure the boy into a self-destructive power-up was a partial success, but the bond with the girl stabilized him. They are now stronger, more connected. They have become a single, symbiotic entity. A rare, faint smile touched Dragon's lips. Good, he said softly. The pieces are moving. The celestial dragons believe this is their endgame, their great purification. They are wrong. He turned to his agent. Your mission is complete. Return to the shadows. Our own final preparations must begin. The silencer nodded, stood, and then vanished as if they had never been there. It was now clear. They were not an agent of Emu, nor a simple observer. They were a triple agent, the deepest undercover operative of the Revolutionary Army, their true purpose to witness and report on Emu's greatest secrets. The final war would not be a simple two-sided conflict between pirates and the world government. It would be a three-way clash for the fate of the world, with the revolutionaries poised to strike when the two titans were at their most vulnerable. The storm was coming. And for the first time in 800 years, the world had a real chance to see the dawn. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.